Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Marina Diaz-Vallecillos. Marina Diaz-Vallecillos was born on December 24, 2002, in Granada, Andalusia, Spain. She grew up in Granada with her mother, Teresa Vallecillos, and her four sisters, Alba, Andrea, Lucia, and Alejandra. Marina was a sociable girl who enjoyed spending time with her friends. Her sister, Andrea, shared that, after finishing high school, she started working at a pharmacy, although it is unclear how she got the job. Her life took a significant turn at the age of 16. At that time, she met a woman named Yasmina, who was born in the late 1980s and was nearly twice her age. However, Marina's family has been strongly opposed to the relationship from the beginning. Since Marina and Yasmina started dating in 2019, the family has been concerned, and her mother has always lived in a state of insecurity. Teresa reported Yasmina to the police several times, fearing for her daughter's safety. Marina was a gentle, sweet, and calm person, which made her family worry that she might be vulnerable to Yasmina's manipulation. It is unclear whether the police took any action regarding these reports, but it is certain that Marina and Yasmina's relationship persisted, with Yasmina displaying increasingly aggressive behavior. Marina confided all the details of her relationship to her mother and sisters, leaving them deeply worried, as Yasmina was extremely cruel. Yasmina repeatedly cut Marina's hair without any reason and used psychological violence by threatening her and attempting to kick her out of the house. Despite this, Yasmina did not want to end the relationship. Yasmina told Marina that if they ever broke up, she would burn down her house and harm all of Marina's relatives. Such a volatile situation was bound to have dire consequences. According to Marina's cousin, Shumar, the reason Marina never reported Yasmina's abusive behavior was her fear of Yasmina's reaction and potential retaliation. What mattered most to Marina was ensuring the safety of her family and avoiding putting them in danger. Over time, as Yasmina and Marina began living together, the violence escalated, resulting in severe social isolation. By early 2021, after being together for roughly a year and a half, they relocated to an undisclosed location, choosing not to share the address with Marina's family. Teresa, the mother of Marina, shared that they felt powerless because they were unable to locate their daughter or provide support. Conflicting information from acquaintances only complicates the situation further, leaving Teresa uncertain about whether they live in a house or an apartment, or even about the exact area of the city where they are located. Teresa lived in constant fear, unable to contact her daughter and worried something terrible might happen. Tragically, on April 13, 2021, her worst fears came true. At around 3 p.m., Yasmina appeared at the police station in Motril, a city on the Mediterranean coast in Granada, and confessed to the crime. Yasmina told the police that the prior day, while she and Marina were at their rented home, a heated argument broke out between them after breakfast. According to Yasmina, Marina eventually took a knife and threatened her, stating that she could no longer endure their relationship after a year and a half of suffering from both mental and physical abuse. Yasmina claimed she believed Marina would attack her with the knife, prompting her to seize the weapon and strike first. Yasmina explained that Marina had begun screaming and calling for help from the landlord, who happened to be their neighbor. However, before anyone could intervene or understand what was happening, Yasmina threw Marina to the floor and continued stabbing her. After realizing that Marina had died, Yasmina decided not to seek help. Instead, she attempted to cover up the crime by wrapping Marina's body in a sheet, taking a shower, and thoroughly cleaning the entire apartment with cleaning products to erase any evidence. Yasmina disposed of the knife by throwing it into a garbage container along the road leading to the village of Gorgarca, located in the municipality of Vélez de Benadryl. Around 5 p.m., Yasmina went to the port of Motril to meet her friend Antonio Manuel, to whom she confessed the murder. She asked for his assistance in finding a place to bury Marina's body. Consequently, Antonio was accused of being an accessory to the crime due to his involvement in the incident following the murder. Initially, Yasmina insisted that she had sought his help. Later, when Antonio was arrested, Yasmina changed her statement, claiming she had only sought emotional support from him during a difficult time. Following Yasmina's confession, the authorities went to the apartment she shared with Marina, where the crime had taken place. Inside, they found Marina's body wrapped in a blanket. Investigators confirmed Yasmina's account, noting that the apartment had been meticulously cleaned, leaving behind no visible evidence of the crime, apart from a strong smell of cleaning products. Due to challenges in collecting evidence, assistance was requested from a specialized unit of the National Police in Motril, experts in detecting altered crime scene traces. This team arrived in Granada on April 14, 2021, shortly after Marina's remains were transported to the city's Anatomical Institute, where all necessary tests were conducted. The results revealed that Marina had died from 24 stab wounds inflicted by Yasmina using a sharp object. It was also determined that Marina, aged 18, had suffered over 20 blows and other injuries to various parts of her body. On April 16, 4 days after the crime, the Court of First Instance No. 3 in Motril ordered Yasmina to be held in pretrial custody without bail. Despite her lack of prior criminal record, the Supreme Court of Andalusia stated that this decision aimed to protect the investigation and prevent her from fleeing. On the same day, the court decided to temporarily release Antonio Manuel, initially suspected of helping conceal the crime, as a precautionary measure. Because no formal request for his arrest had been made, he was required to report to the authorities every Tuesday, and his passport was confiscated. On the same day, the government of Granada announced that the case would be treated as an instance of domestic violence since Yasmina and Marina had been living together. Although the authorities acted swiftly, the trial did not commence until December 13, 2022. Friends and family of Marina gathered outside the court, shouting and demanding justice for the young woman who had tragically lost her life shortly after she had turned 18. During the trial, Marina's family lawyer, Jesus Huertos, highlighted the brutal nature of Yasmina's actions, detailing the extensive injuries Marina had suffered. He said that Yasmina deserved a life sentence but should still be given the opportunity to rehabilitate. Additionally, Marina's psychologist, who also counseled her mother, Teresa, testified in court. The psychologist revealed that Marina had repeatedly expressed her fear of Yasmina's violent behavior and had stated that she no longer wanted to continue the relationship. Other witnesses provided statements backing this narrative. The prosecution argued that Yasmina had intentionally prolonged Marina's suffering before carrying out the killing, emphasizing the cruelty of the act. However, unlike the family's lawyer, the prosecution did not seek a life sentence. Instead, they recommended a 17-year prison term. The defense attorney representing Yasmina argued that she had been in poor physical and mental condition at the time of the crime. On that day, she had allegedly taken antidepressants while also consuming illegal substances, which impaired her perception of reality. According to the lawyer, Yasmina reacted violently when Marina expressed her desire to leave the house and approached her with a knife. The lawyer asserted that Yasmina was unable to fully comprehend her actions and requested her acquittal during the initial hearing. During the trial, Yasmina expressed remorse, acknowledging the difficulty she had in understanding her actions, while admitting her awareness of the gravity of the crime. She revealed that her decision to surrender to the authorities stemmed from her realization that Marina did not deserve to be buried in an unmarked, improvised grave. Yasmina explained that her intent was not only to ensure Marina received a proper burial but also to take responsibility for her actions. However, she insisted that she never intended to harm her partner, claiming her actions were meant to protect Marina instead. These statements conflicted with testimony from Marina's relatives as well as Yasmina's initial statements. In early March 2023, a provisional court in Granada sentenced Yasmina to 17 years in prison for murder, taking into account mitigating factors such as her relationship with Marina and her voluntary confession. After serving her prison term, she will be subjected to conditional release for 5 years. Additionally, Yasmina must fulfill financial and personal obligations, including paying €75,000 in compensation to Marina's mother and €22,000 to Marina's sisters, Alba, Andrea Lucia, and Alejandra. She is also prohibited from contacting them for 22 years. Regarding Antonio Manuel, who was initially accused of helping to conceal the crime, the prosecutor's office recommended a prison sentence of 15 months. However, due to his cognitive disability, judicial authorities ultimately dropped all charges against him. Marina's family announced plans to appeal the decision, arguing that the punishment was insufficient given the severity of the crime. In public statements, they criticized the lack of support from Spanish legal institutions, particularly since the case was not fully classified as domestic violence. They expressed deep concern about the authorities' stance on this issue, which they deemed highly significant. In their appeal efforts, the prosecution aimed not only to increase Yasmina's sentence but also to establish a precedent for similar cases. Meanwhile, Yasmina's defense announced plans to file an appeal, seeking either a reduction in the charges or a complete reversal of the verdict. In July 2023, the Supreme Court of Andalusia rejected both appeals, upholding the original sentence of 17 years in prison along with the restrictions imposed on Yasmina. The court confirmed that the sentence was appropriate and justified based on the evidence presented during the trial. In press interviews, Teresa, Marina's mother, shared the hardships she and her 4 daughters faced following Marina's tragic death. She also expressed frustration over the authorities' failure to implement adequate protective measures, despite the numerous complaints she had personally filed. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Sharon Edwards. David Edwards, a dedicated and respected solicitor. After completing his studies, he moved to Chorley, Lancashire to live and work, where he was highly regarded by his colleagues. David was kind and friendly, which helped him make friends easily in his new town. He developed a passion for football, and as he attended more local matches, he felt increasingly connected to the community. Every weekend they would travel together to watch matches, both home and away. David was well liked in this group for his ability to make everyone laugh and for his willingness to help those in need. In his career, David practiced law with enthusiasm and quickly gained respect in the local community due to his exceptional legal skills. Over time, he became a popular lawyer. This experience further solidified his reputation, and he often received compliments from colleagues and clients alike. During work, David encountered a couple in need of his legal expertise, Sharon and her husband. Sharon, born in 1974, in her younger years, she was in a relationship with a man, and together they had 2 sons, but they separated while the boys were still very young. Later, Sharon had 2 daughters. From other relationships that did not succeed, she gained a reputation among her neighbors as a difficult person. Sharon struggled with heavy drinking, which created a chaotic environment in her home. She often exhibited domestic violence toward her partners and children. Ironically, one of her sons became a frequent target of her anger and suffered both physical and mental abuse. Over time, the abuse escalated, and he was eventually kicked out of the home as a teenager. Fortunately, his grandfather welcomed him to live with him. Sharon sought David's legal advice regarding a dispute with her neighbor. Her life continued as usual, characterized by frequent violent and abusive interactions with those around her. In 2004, her then-partner filed complaints against her for assault, alleging that she had bitten his forearm and hit him in the face. However, the police only issued her a warning. David was making significant progress in his career, but his intense work schedule often left him exhausted. His friends would tease him about dozing off during football matches due to his fatigue. Meanwhile, his personal life felt stagnant, which was frustrating for him since he longed to start a family. One night, things took a positive turn. David and his friends decided to go to a local bar for a karaoke night, a regular outing where they enjoyed drinks and fun. At the bar, David met a young woman from Chorley, who also frequented karaoke nights. She was excited to see David and was charmed by how he creatively altered the rhythm of songs. As the night went on, filled with drinks, singing, and laughter, David and she formed a connection that quickly developed into a strong friendship. A few months later, they became a couple. She appreciated not only David's company, but also his dedication and professionalism in his career. She often attended court to watch him handle his cases. When she became pregnant, David was extremely excited. Over the next 9 months, he was attentive and caring, attending all of her medical appointments, keeping the house tidy, cooking, and ensuring that both she and their future child had everything they needed. On the day their daughter was born, David cried tears of joy as he held her for the first time. He was very happy, and that happiness continued as little girl grew. David took care of all the little girl's needs, changed her diapers, and comforted her when she couldn't sleep. However, over time, that happiness began to fade. When little girl turned 5, they decided to take a break, hoping that the separation would help rekindle their feelings for each other. After 7 months apart, they realized that the best choice was to end their romantic relationship while preserving the friendship that had brought them together in the first place. David, understanding that he was single, yet feeling lonely, began to consider the possibility of meeting someone new. While browsing a social media platform, he accidentally seen Sharon's profile. Recognizing her from a case he had worked, he decided to send her a friend request. She accepted, and over the next few weeks, they exchanged messages and agreed to meet for drinks. When they finally met in person, they felt a strong attraction to each other, and both enjoyed drinking. Without hesitation, David invited Sharon to his home that same evening, marking the start of their intense romance. They soon decided to live together, and David quickly rented a large 4-bedroom house where he moved in with Sharon and her 4 children. At first, everything seemed fine, but after a few weeks, Sharon began to return to her violent habits. One night, while she was drunk, she insulted David and then pushed him, causing him to fall and break his collarbone. When he visited his therapist to address the injury, he joked that his girlfriend had grabbed him hard by the shoulder. Then, during a visit to his daughter at his ex-girlfriend's house, David came up with a new story to explain the fracture, claiming he had fallen down the stairs. Sometime later, David was supposed to pick up his daughter to take her to a party, but he had been drinking beforehand. When he called his ex-girlfriend to confirm that he was on his way, she immediately realized that David was drunk and refused to let him take their daughter, clearly unhappy with his behavior. Dissatisfied, Sharon drives to her ex-lover David's house. Upon arriving, Sharon kicked the door and shouted, demanding that the little girl come out. At that moment, the little girl's mother was returning from work and was shocked by the disturbing scene caused by Sharon. A heated argument ensued between them, and Sharon had to leave without achieving her goal. From the outside, David and Sharon appeared to lead an almost perfect life. David had become a partner at a law firm and owned a house worth $390,000. This situation provided Sharon with financial stability and a chance for social advancement. She adorned herself with expensive jewelry and always dressed impeccably. The only thing Sharon could not buy with David's money was education and self-control. Her fiery and confrontational personality remained unchanged. Nevertheless, David believed wholeheartedly that Sharon was the right one for him. Overwhelmed by love, he goes to the renowned jewelry quarter to purchase an engagement ring, and they became engaged on Christmas 2014. Colleagues at the law firm and court officials started to notice that something was wrong in David's family life. He came to work with bruises under his eyes and scratches on his face. When people asked about his injuries, he claimed he had simply fallen or bumped into something. However, David once shared his difficulties with Deborah Livesley, a former long-term partner of his. She encouraged him to leave Sharon, file a police report, and reclaim his life, but David dismissed her advice. In June 2015, David and Sharon traveled to Las Vegas to get married. The night before the wedding, another incident of violence occurred. While they were looking at photos, Sharon claimed she had shown David what true love was over the past year. David, however, did not react with the joy she expected, and the evidence of their altercation was still visible on his face. On their wedding day, Sharon wore a white lace sleeveless dress, while David had to apply makeup for the first time to cover his bruises. After returning from Las Vegas, David received some upsetting news. A competitor had taken over the company, and he was being laid off. They had already planned a honeymoon trip to Spain, so despite the unfavorable situation, they entrusted their home to Sharon's youngest daughter and went on the trip. However, upon their return, the tension in their marriage intensified instead of improving. On the day they got back, while shopping for wine, Sharon confronted David in front of other customers, expressing her frustration. This confrontation was captured by surveillance cameras, and they left the store with 4 bottles of wine, which marked the start of increased violence in their relationship. Once they got home, Sharon attacked David with a knife. Sharon's youngest daughter discovered him shortly afterward. When Sharon's youngest daughter confronted her, Sharon claimed she never meant to hurt David, despite how unbelievable that sounded. Later, David and Sharon went to a bar, with David still bleeding while Sharon continued to drink. At the entrance of the bar, a police officer on patrol noticed Sharon yelling at David and attempting to assault him. The officer intervened and recorded the incident with the camera attached to his uniform. Initially, Sharon acted as if nothing was wrong, but moments later, she began to accuse David again while trying to avoid the police, who were attempting to calm her down. Sharon reacted violently, flailing her arms, while David claimed he hadn't attacked her, and that his injuries were from a fall. The police officer decided not to arrest Sharon. Instead, he placed David and Sharon in a patrol car and took them home. During the ride, the officer's camera captured Sharon threatening to kill David. However, the police dismissed her threats, thinking it was just a drunken woman's tantrum, and left them at their home. Once home, David and Sharon resumed their argument. On Saturday, August 23, 2015, Sharon followed through on her earlier threats. She stabbed David in the heart with a knife. 2 hours later, she acted shocked and distressed, running outside to call for help from neighbors and claiming her husband was not breathing. One neighbor came to assist and called emergency services. The paramedics who arrived found David in his bed with no signs of life. The police quickly began questioning Sharon. She claimed that after a heated argument with her husband, he took a knife and stabbed himself. Despite her account, the police arrested Sharon on suspicion of murder and took her to the station for further questioning. Sharon insisted that David was not dead, cried, and wanted to speak with him. Her story seemed unconvincing to the investigators from the start. They also noted her aggressive demeanor, which raised further suspicion. Upon examining the crime scene, investigators found it unusually neat and clean, suggesting that someone had deliberately cleaned up. The pathologist later determined that David died from a single knife wound to the heart. Additionally, the autopsy revealed 60 external wounds on David's body, both old and recent, including 30 cuts or stab wounds, as well as injuries on his knuckles and a superficial wound on his scalp. The estimated time of death was 1 to 2 hours earlier than what Sharon had reported, indicating that she had enough time to clean up and plan her next moves. The gathered evidence provided sufficient grounds to charge Sharon with murder. To avoid any potential bias due to her relationship with David, it was decided that the trial would take place outside of Lancashire. The trial occurred on March 8, 2016, at Manchester Crown Court. The jury stated that Sharon, who had a domineering personality, had beaten her husband during their brief relationship. The lead prosecutor stated that the case exhibited all the tragic signs of domestic violence. As part of her defense, Sharon attempted to present herself as innocent and vulnerable by allowing the court to watch a video of her wedding. In the video, she expressed her love for her husband, referring to him as her other half and beloved. She also claimed to have no interest in knives and expressed disgust toward them. However, the jury did not find her explanations credible. Consequently, they unanimously found Sharon guilty of murder. Before sentencing, Judge William Davis pointed out that her actions had taken a good person away from society. Sharon showed no emotion when the verdict was read and remained calm when she was sentenced to life in prison. After leaving Manchester Crown Court, David's younger brother spoke on behalf of his brother and other abuse victims. He highlighted the importance of male victims sharing their experiences, noting that many men hesitate to report abuse due to the stigma of weakness. He also expressed gratitude to the jurors and shared that the family felt relieved the trial was over, allowing them to focus on the positive memories of David's life. On December 5, 2017, Sharon filed a petition in the London Court of Appeal, attempting to clear her name. She also criticized the media coverage of her case. However, 3 senior judges denied her request to appeal her conviction, stating that her petition lacked sufficient grounds. They rejected her application for leave to appeal. During the hearing, which she attended via video link from prison, the court noted Sharon's history of abusing others and her multiple attacks on David. Less than a year later, Sharon's second child, who had suffered from his mother's violence during childhood, attacked his girlfriend and then took his own life. Reports suggest that feelings of guilt and memories of his mother contributed to this tragic outcome. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Danilo Restivo. Elisa Claps was born in 1977 in Potenza, Italy, a small town with a population of just under 70,000, known for its steep slopes. Her mother was a treasury clerk, and her father worked in a tobacco shop. Elisa was the youngest of 3 children, with 2 older brothers named Gildo and Luciano. The family was very religious and attended church every Sunday. Elisa was known for her kindness and sweet nature. She always focused on the good in people, which sometimes made her seem naive. This drew others to her, so she had many friends. In 1993, 16-year-old Elisa was in her senior year of high school and was thinking about her future. She dreamed of becoming a doctor and planned to enroll in medical school after graduation. Her ultimate goal was to volunteer in Africa with Médecins Sans Frontières. On September 12, 1993, Elisa was preparing for a family gathering at their country house and wanted to get everything ready early in the morning. Her parents and one of her brothers had gone out of town, while Gildo was expected to arrive later for lunch. As usual on Sundays, Elisa planned to go to church with her friend Eliana de Silas, who would also join the family for the festive meal afterward. Elisa woke up early that morning, left home at 11:30, and went to the Church of Chiesa della Trinità, located in the center of town. Her brother was waiting for her return. While he was waiting, the doorbell rang, and he thought Elisa had come back from church. Instead, he found Eliana at the door. She explained that they had been together at church, but when they exited, a large crowd passed by, and they got separated. Eliana said she couldn't find Elisa and decided to come to her house, hoping she had already returned. From the start, her explanation seemed unconvincing since it was hard to lose track of someone in such a small town. When her brother pointed out these inconsistencies, Eliana changed her story. She admitted that Elisa was supposed to meet a boy and that the plan was for the schoolgirls to go home together after the service. However, her friend was unable to find Elisa at the agreed time. According to Eliana, the mysterious boy was named Danilo Restivo. He was born on April 3, 1972, in Iris, a small town in Sicily. In the mid-1980s, Danilo and his family moved to Potenza, Basilicata, after his father, Maurizio, secured a job as the director of the municipal library, a prestigious position that prompted the family to relocate. The other boys found Danilo to be unusual. During his school years, he engaged in troubling behavior, such as spying on girls in the bathroom and keeping a diary to record what he observed. His cousin, who is 2 years younger, described him as an introvert who struggled to communicate with his peers, particularly girls. Danilo's sister, Antonella Restivo, noted that they would often walk home together, and he would try to persuade her to go to different places for various reasons. She usually declined, but one day her curiosity got the better of her, and she wanted to see what Danilo was talking about. Not wanting to go alone, she asked her cousin, who was 11 at the time, to join her. When the children arrived at the designated time and place, Danilo told them he needed to blindfold them and tie their wrists so they could go to a secret location. They both agreed. Danilo led them to a place where he seated them in chairs. Antonella managed to push her blindfold aside and saw Danilo putting on gloves. After that, he took a knife, tilted the cousin's head back, and stabbed him. Antonella reacted quickly and attacked Danilo, causing him to flee. The cousin was injured and bleeding, but Antonella helped him, and they both ran away together. Danilo chased after them, shouting for them not to tell anyone about what had happened. The cousin lost a significant amount of blood, and when he arrived at the hospital, doctors discovered that the knife had come dangerously close to a vital artery. He was on the brink of a serious injury. The children informed the adults about the incident, clarifying that it was not an accident. Consequently, a police report was filed against Danilo for his actions. Danilo's father, Maurizio, visited the family of Danilo's cousin and tearfully asked them to withdraw the police report. He offered them money and claimed to understand Danilo's psychological issues, promising to get him the help he needed. Because he was a respected member of the community, Danilo's cousin's family agreed to his plea. They accepted the money and dropped the report. However, instead of fulfilling his promise, Maurizio obstructed Danilo's treatment to protect his own reputation. As a result, Danilo changing schools several times without finding a place where he felt accepted. After attending 3 different schools, his father eventually enrolled him in a private college where he graduated from high school. Danilo then joined the military, but was dismissed shortly after due to inappropriate behavior and bedwetting. Despite his father's wealth and connections, Danilo struggled with personal issues. He earned a reputation for being intrusive and rude toward girls, and his father did nothing to intervene, allowing Danilo's behavior to worsen. He became fixated on 3 girls in his neighborhood, spying on them, and developing an unhealthy obsession. He would call them, breathing heavily into the phone or commenting on their outfits. Sometimes, he even played classical music over the phone, which made the girls uncomfortable. His actions escalated to sending disturbing letters and creepy gifts, including a timer with severed wires labeled, "Boom, this is how much time you have left." One of the girls, Elisa, became the main focus of Danilo's obsession. He would show up unexpectedly in places he knew she would be and ask her out on dates, but Elisa did not like him and found him annoying. Despite this, her kind nature led her to agree to meet him several times while trying to maintain her distance. Elisa's brother Gildo noticed Danilo's intrusive behavior. One day, while walking with Elisa, Danilo approached them, calling out to her and trying to pull her away. Elisa squeezed Gildo's hand tightly, indicating her fear, and Gildo chased Danilo away. Gildo was concerned by his sister's frightened reaction, but Elisa chose not to share the details of her encounters with Danilo. When Elisa's friend Eliana mentioned that Elisa was supposed to meet Danilo at church, Gildo became worried. Meanwhile, Elisa hoped this meeting would stop Danilo from pursuing her. Gildo called Danilo's house, but Mr. Maurizio hesitated to let Gildo speak with his son. Gildo expressed his concern that Elisa had not returned home after the meeting with Danilo. Eventually, Mr. Maurizio gave the phone to Danilo, who said he had seen Elisa at church. He claimed she had complained about a young man bothering her and then left while he stayed behind to pray. After that, Mr. Maurizio quickly ended the conversation, making Gildo suspicious. He informed her family about the situation, and they all hurried home to find Elisa. One of her brothers, Luciano, couldn't wait any longer and decided to confront Danilo directly. When he knocked on the door, Mr. Maurizio refused to let him in, prompting Luciano to threaten to break it down. Finally, Danilo appeared, looking anxious and sweating, and began repeating the story he had told Gildo on the phone, stuttering and clearly nervous. Minutes later, Mr. Maurizio suddenly ended his conversation with the neighbor, similar to how he had ended the phone call. The brothers returned home and then went to the church where their sister had already gone. They wanted to check the location where Elisa was supposed to meet Danilo, believing this was likely where she had disappeared. They looked around the church and attempted to enter the upper secret room, but the priest did not allow them in. The family decided to notify the police about Elisa's disappearance, expressing their belief that Danilo was involved. Unfortunately, law enforcement did not initially take the case seriously. They only accepted the report after a day and then went to Restivo's house to question Danilo. Upon arrival, they spoke with Mr. Maurizio, who informed them that his son had left Potenza for Naples and would likely return the following day. The next day, the police went to the bus station in Naples to meet Danilo, but he was not there. It was later discovered that Maurizio had intercepted the bus before it reached the city and took Danilo away. The detectives then went to the family home to question Danilo. When they asked him about the shoes he was wearing on the day Elisa went missing, he said he was wearing sneakers and showed them a pair of wet shoes soaked in bleach, which raised their suspicions. In the evening, Danilo and Maurizio visited the police station, where Danilo shared his account of Elisa's disappearance. His statements were inconsistent, and he appeared visibly nervous. The detectives noticed a deep cut on his hand, which Danilo attributed to an accident in the street. He claimed he had tripped on a staircase and impaled himself on a metal object. He said the deep cut caused heavy bleeding, which stained his clothes. However, Danilo could not identify the location of this incident in the city. Wherever he took the police to support his story, there were no signs of blood. Additionally, his account changed several times during questioning, raising further suspicion. According to his sister, at noon when Elisa disappeared, Danilo returned home covered in blood. She recounted that when he returned home, not only his jacket was stained with blood, but also his shirt and jeans. She noticed Danilo's injury and took him to the hospital, where doctors stitched up his wounds. Judging by the description, it was evident that there was far too much blood for a mere accidental cut to his hand. Despite Danilo's explanation, the police quickly concluded that his injury was caused by a knife. By this time, all the clothes had been washed at the Restivo home. The investigators needed these items to send for forensic examination, explaining that this way they could clear all suspicions about Danilo. But Danilo's family objected. From 11:30 to 13 on the day Elisa went missing, no one saw Danilo, and there was no one available to confirm his statements. At this time, the police officer contacted the chief prosecutor overseeing the investigation into Elisa's disappearance. Despite the reasonable suspicions, the request for a warrant was denied. The prosecutor overlooked the fact that Danilo had previously been involved in a suspicious incident. Additionally, he was clearly the last person known to have seen Elisa alive. Witnesses reported seeing him in the church with Elisa, but none saw her leave. Investigators found a torn-out page in Elisa's diary, suggesting she or someone else was trying to conceal something. Progress in the case hit a standstill until October 5, when Elisa's disappearance and the main suspect, Danilo Restivo, were highlighted on a television program. During the live broadcast, an anonymous woman called in, expressing her belief that Danilo was connected to Elisa's disappearance. She mentioned that he had a fascination with women and collected strange items, including framed locks of hair. To acquire these hair samples, he often loitered near hair salons, where local workers jokingly referred to him as a barber. After the show aired, several women approached the police to identify Danilo and accuse him of cutting their hair without permission in public and hair salons. The police began to view him as someone exhibiting obsessive and inappropriate behavior, which raised concerns about potential deviance. The women shared troubling accounts of his actions, indicating that he was a disturbance to his neighbors. While some considered him an eccentric but harmless individual, they remained unaware of his more sinister traits. Danilo's father maintained that his son had never harmed anyone, although there are stories of incidents involving Danilo's cousin. While many believed that Danilo was involved in Elisa's disappearance, some of his supporters suggested that Elisa had simply left on her own. Elisa's father, who was very close to her, felt early on that he might never see her again. Meanwhile, the Silas family was attentive to the ongoing developments regarding Danilo. The incident lasted until 1996. He was charged with providing false testimony about Elisa's disappearance. Detectives had gathered evidence that contradicted his claims regarding their interactions, his hand injury, and other aspects of the case. Because of his fraudulent behavior, Danilo was eventually sentenced to prison, and he spent part of his sentence working at the local church that Elisa often attended on Sundays. During the trial, Elisa's best friend Eliana was not forthcoming when asked about the false testimony. When the prosecutor pressed her, she revealed her fear that she might suffer the same fate as Elisa, implying that she knew more than she was admitting. Although some of his harassment victims reported him to the police, he only received a fine, which had little effect due to his father's wealth. Meanwhile, the Silas family was anxiously awaiting updates from investigators, hoping for progress in locating their daughter and bringing the perpetrator to justice. Unfortunately, the case remained stagnant until 1999, when a mobster began cooperating with the investigation, providing some new information. While he could not provide details about Elisa, he disclosed that the district attorney had prevented the confiscation of Danilo's clothing. This attorney had canceled the warrant in exchange for a large payment from Mr. Maurizio, effectively hindering the investigation. The mobster was ultimately convicted of slander, but his disclosures prompted a new investigative team to take over Elisa's case. Unfortunately, they had to start from the beginning. The police obtained a search warrant and searched Danilo's home, where they uncovered disturbing items, including a box of photographs of women with visible physical disabilities. Danilo claimed these women were his ex-girlfriends, but it was later revealed that he had intentionally sought out one-legged and one-armed women to photograph, exposing his fascination with mutilated bodies. Investigators also looked into the church to access a door that the local priest, Domenico Sabbia, had previously refused to open for the Chillis family. The priest had locked the church doors to all parishioners and had traveled to Fiji for a wellness retreat, showing little willingness to cooperate. After his release, Danilo traveled across Europe. Although he was in different cities, he continued his reckless behavior by attempting to harass women by cutting their hair. Danilo had moved to the UK after meeting Marsango online. They married, and he accepted her 2 children from a previous relationship. He occasionally returned to visit his parents, always appearing calm. Meanwhile, Gildo created a website to raise awareness about her sister's disappearance. Then, Gildo received a letter signed Elisa, stating that she had run away to Brazil and requested not to be searched for. Realizing it was a fake, Gildo traced the sender's address and discovered that Danilo himself had sent the letter. This revelation heightened the suspicions against him. The case remained unsolved until November 12, 2002, when authorities discovered the body of Heather Barnett, a 48-year-old single mother, in her home in Bournemouth, UK. Her daughters returned from school to find her unresponsive in the bathroom, surrounded by a pool of blood. Heather had been violently attacked with a hammer, Her throat and one of her breasts had been severed. A portion of her hair was cut, and about 30 strands were placed in her left hand. A strand of foreign hair was found in her right hand. It is believed she was assaulted shortly after arriving home from school that morning. During the investigation, the police quickly turned their attention to two suspicious neighbors, Marsango and Danilo, both of whom were Italian. Heather worked from home, and it was reported that Danilo had gone to her house to discuss sewing curtains. He was the first person to arrive at the scene with Marsango, just as Heather's children were calling for help. He tried to comfort the girls in that distressing moment. The police brought Danilo in for questioning after the murder. He showed them a bus ticket with a timestamp to support his alibi, claiming he was attending computer courses at the time of the crime. The police believed him and let him go. Danilo seemed to be an awkward person who would leave many clues, unlike the actual murderer. The tests revealed a trail of bloody shoe prints that suddenly stopped, indicating the killer had changed shoes before leaving. It was later discovered that Danilo had cleaned his sneakers with bleach, a practice he had done previously. Terry, Heather's daughter, mentioned that her mother had lost her keys after Danilo's recent visit, but she did not change the locks. This explained why Danilo visited frequently. He had scoped out the crime scene and taken the keys to access the house. The police started monitoring Danilo and tapped his phone for evidence. During their surveillance, they observed him stalking vulnerable women. They decided to confront him and search his belongings. Danilo was found wearing suspicious waterproof pants, and in his car, the police discovered a change of clothes, a butcher's knife, scissors, a balaclava, and gloves, which amounted to an alarming collection of potential crime tools. When the police searched Danilo's home, they found hair strands on the sneakers he wore the day of the murder, along with small bloodstains that were difficult to identify due to bleach. DNA testing showed that a bloodied towel left at the crime scene contained Danilo's DNA, which he claimed he had accidentally left behind during a visit. The police reached out to their colleagues in Italy and discovered that Danilo was a suspect in the disappearance of Elisa, leading many to suspect that he had killed her. The matter remained unresolved until March 17, 2010. 17 years after Elisa vanished, her mummified remains were found by a repair crew in the attic of Most Holy Trinity Church. The remains included her glasses, shoes, pieces of her clothing, and strands of foreign hair. Her bra had been cut, her chest showed signs of mutilation, and her jeans were unbuttoned, indicating she had been abused. Her family suspected that priest Domenico Sabbia had intentionally hidden the body and knew where it was, as he had never allowed anyone to inspect the locked sections of the church. Following the discovery, the church was closed. Preliminary forensic examinations revealed that Elisa had been struck approximately 10 times with a sharp object, likely a knife or scissors. While searching the church attic, investigators found fingerprints and DNA samples belonging to Danilo. Elisa was laid to rest on July 2, 2011. Before, on the afternoon of May 20, 2010, Danilo was arrested in England and charged with the murder of Heather Barnett, with accumulating evidence against him. On June 30, 2011, Danilo Restivo was sentenced to life in prison by Winchester Crown Court. Danilo immediately filed an appeal. On November 8, 2011, a simplified judicial process began in Italy for the murder of Elisa. Danilo, the accused, chose not to participate, even via video link. At that time, legal proceedings in Britain were still ongoing, which resulted in his extradition being denied. The prosecution argued that Danilo had planned to meet Elisa at the church that day, with harmful intentions. When Elisa realized his intentions, she tried to escape by hiding in the attic, but he found her and attacked her from behind. Despite her attempts to defend herself, he abused and killed her. The prosecution presented DNA evidence from bloodstains on Elisa's clothing that matched Danilo's. It was also revealed that Danilo had injured his arm during the struggle, leaving his blood on her clothes. The Italian prosecution requested a 30-year prison sentence, which the court granted on November 11. Additionally, Danilo was ordered to pay €700,000 to Elisa's family. This verdict was confirmed after the final court proceedings, which included Danilo's presence. After the appeal of the Heather Barnett murder case in November 2012, the UK Court of Appeal altered Danilo's minimum sentence to 40 years, stating that it was highly unlikely he would be released. So, in 2051, after completing his sentence in the UK, he will be extradited to Italy to serve an additional 30 years for the murder of Elisa. The long delay in the Elisa Claps murder case was due to several factors, including accusations against the Santissima Trinità Church in Potenza and various individuals involved. These factors contributed to the concealment of the truth and prolonged the investigation. An assistant to the priest, who was found earlier, explained that he did not report the discovery right away because the archbishop was busy that day, and he forgot to do so the following day. Despite protests from Elisa's family, all charges against the church were eventually dropped, especially after the relatives reacted to a memorial plaque that was placed in the church to honor Domenico Sabbia, who concealed the crime and hid the body for many years. In early November 2023, despite objections, the church reopened, and the first service was held. The family of British victim, Heather Barnett, criticized the Italian police's investigation, arguing that if Elisa's body had been found sooner and the perpetrator apprehended, Heather would still be alive. They claimed that the lack of accountability had emboldened the suspect, with some believing he may have committed ritual murders. Elisa was murdered on September 12, 1993, and Heather on November 12, 2002. It raises suspicion that he attacked his victims on those specific dates and left a strand of hair at each crime scene. There are concerns that Danilo Restivo may have had many more victims. Omar Benguit, who has been convicted of murdering Korean national Jong Ok-shin, was sentenced for the crime. Jong Ok-shin was attacked a few meters from her home, 3 blocks from where Danilo lived. There are lawyers suggesting that another individual, Danilo, may have committed the crime for which Omar was sentenced. They claim that the method of murder and the knife used are similar, and a clump of hair was discovered near the body. Jong Ok-shin was killed in 2002, but there is currently no evidence to directly link Danilo to this murder, which is why he has not faced charges in this case. Danilo is under suspicion for assaults on women in Italy, France, and the UK during his stays in those countries. Among them, he is particularly being investigated for a possible link to the disappearance of Erika Ansermin in Italy. Erika went missing on April 20, 2003, after failing to arrive for an Easter lunch with her boyfriend and his mother. Following Danilo's arrest, investigators discovered that he had searched for information about Erika on his computer and appeared to be tracking the developments of her case. This behavior has raised concerns, as it is often exhibited by offenders. To this day, Erika's body has not been found, and no charges have been filed in connection with her disappearance. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Candy Montgomery. Candy Montgomery was born on November 15, 1949, into a military family, which meant that she moved frequently throughout her childhood. Candy's bubbly personality made her stand out. At the age of 20, she met Pat Montgomery while they were both working at a tool and equipment company. In the 1970s, Pat was employed as an electrical engineer, while Candy worked as a secretary. Pat was hardworking and responsible, and his income provided stability and comfort in their lives. At first, their relationship faced many challenges. Candy found Pat unattractive. However, her views changed when she heard rumors about Pat's income from family friends, which made her want to give him a chance. In 1977, they decided to get married, and soon after, they moved to Wiley, Texas, a small town that is an ideal place to raise a family, offering a low crime rate and a quiet atmosphere. Candy, a devoted wife and mother, settled into her new home with Pat and their 2 children. She became active in social events, attended church, and sang in the local choir. Additionally, she also became a member of the Parents Committee and earned the respect of the community, with many people looking up to her. Overall, the Montgomery family had everything they needed for a comfortable life. They got along well with their neighbors and regularly attended the local Lucas Methodist Church. Many considered them a typical American family, with a daughter and a son who received plenty of love and support from their parents. Soon after moving in, Candy met a local school teacher named Betty Gore. They joined the church choir together, and their daughters quickly became close friends, often spending the night at each other's homes. Candy and Betty also became friends, occasionally attending school events and church together and frequently seeing each other on weekends. Gradually, Candy found her home life boring. She began to take an interest in Betty's husband, Alan Gore, whom she met at social events in town. Betty had met Alan when he was a teaching assistant at the university. Initially, Betty's family disapproved of their relationship, believing that Alan was too quiet and unsuitable for her. However, they fell in love and ignored their parents' concerns. They married in the 70s and later welcomed their first daughter before moving to Wiley. Alan was a hard-working family man, but his job often required him to leave town. Betty did not enjoy these absences. She preferred when Alan was home with her and their daughter. Whenever he was away, she had to manage the household and care for the child by herself. Although she kept in touch with Alan, she often expressed frustration about his business trips and her excessive exhaustion. One day, Betty called Alan's boss to ask him to stop sending Alan on business trips. This was impossible because he was an irreplaceable, first-class professional. Over time, Betty's frustration grew, leading her to frequently contact Alan's manager while he was away. Some speculated that her behavior suggested she might be suffering from postpartum depression. Instead of seeing Alan's job as an opportunity for financial stability and family happiness, Betty viewed it as a burden. She may have exaggerated her situation, especially since other women had dealt with similar problems more easily. Her situation may have been worsened by the fact that she had few friends. The relationship between Alan and his wife Betty became increasingly strained. Alan felt additional pressure from Betty, who could not understand the necessity of his business trips. These trips were essential to his high salary, which he could not afford to lose. Betty could be a difficult person, so Alan tried his best not to upset her as their marriage began to show signs of trouble. He started staying late at work more often, hoping to avoid arguments. Betty faced challenges even before she became pregnant. Likewise, Candy had her own struggles, and both of their marriages were deteriorating. When Alan and Candy met, they felt an immediate attraction and saw each other as an escape from their problems. However, they were both married, went to church, and lived in conservative communities, which made the idea of an affair terrifying for them. In October 1978, their situation changed dramatically. After a volleyball game in the church community, Candy expressed her feelings and proposed to Alan that they start a relationship. Alan, who was feeling frustrated with his own marriage, was intrigued by the suggestion but remained hesitant. A week later, during another volleyball game, Alan's interest in Candy increased significantly. He spent the entire week pondering her words. At this point, the tension between him and Betty was escalating. Seizing the opportunity, Candy reiterated her proposal, and this time Alan could not refuse. Meanwhile, Candy also felt anxious about the situation. She confided in her close friend, a church pastor, about her desire to have an affair, although she did not reveal who she would be involved with. Candy's friend tried to convince her not to go through with it, but Candy remained silent about her intentions. When Alan agreed to the relationship with Candy, they both made a list of pros and cons and established strict rules to follow. The main idea of their agreement was to keep their relationship purely physical. It seemed that Candy wanted to avoid emotional connection in order to maintain her relationship with her husband and simply have fun on the side. She convinced Alan to adhere to these rules. The rules stated that they would meet in the city, pay $23 cash for a room, and Alan would cover half the cost. Their meetings became frequent, always focused on intimacy. They could only meet for short periods and never spend the entire night together. A key point in their agreement was the requirement to avoid any emotional connection. They agreed that if either of them showed any feelings, they would end the relationship immediately. Candy found joy and excitement in this new relationship. However, her husband Pat was a good man, a loving father, and a reliable provider for the family. So she continued to maintain a stable relationship with him. Surprisingly, Alan's marriage also seemed to improve. Betty became less annoying, and Alan even began to see the positive aspects of his marriage. He started to spend more time at home with his family. During this time, an important event occurred. Betty became pregnant again, which brought genuine joy to both her and her husband. To celebrate Betty's pregnancy, Candy threw a party. Over time, the relationship between Candy and Alan began to change. They started to see each other less often. Alan also wanted to spend more time with his children and focused on saving his marriage with Betty. Alan began attending a church program aimed at restoring and strengthening marital relationships. After participating in the program, he realized that his relationship with Candy should end. On the way home, he avoided eye contact with Candy, making it clear that he did not want to continue their affair and had chosen to focus on his marriage. Alan even changed jobs to reduce his business trips. He ended the relationship and refused to see Candy. Candy felt deeply hurt by this decision. At first, she tried to suppress her feelings, but the emotional bond they had built over the year became too great. She was even more disappointed when Alan ended things. She felt used and discarded. After a while, Pat Montgomery discovered a postcard with a congratulatory message addressed to Candy. Pat realized that Candy had been involved in an affair. However, he was not angry with his wife. Instead, he blamed himself for the situation, believing that he had neglected her. At this point, only Betty was unaware of the recently ended love triangle. Pat decided to follow the same path that had helped Alan improve his marriage. He took Candy to a church program designed to strengthen the relationship between husband and wife. The program lasted about a year, and it seemed that Pat did not consider Candy's affair to be significant. Betty still did not know what had happened, but everything changed on Friday, June 13, 1980, at 10 a.m. Candy went to Betty's house to pick up a swimsuit for her eldest daughter. She then went home and continued her day as usual. At the same time, Alan was away on business. He tried calling Betty at home several times, but no one answered. This worried him, as it was unusual for her not to respond. She often waited for his phone call and sometimes called him several times an hour. Her sudden silence concerned him. Alan then asked the neighbors to check on her. Late in the evening, the neighbors returned and knocked on Alan's door to check, but there was no response. They searched the grounds with flashlights but found nothing unusual outside. When they entered the unlocked house, everything seemed normal. In the kitchen, they noticed 2 empty glasses on the table. However, when they called out, no one answered, except for the sound of a child crying from the basement. When they went down to the basement, they found Betty dead. Betty's body was so badly disfigured that it was unrecognizable. The neighbors quickly called the police and informed Alan of their discovery. Forensic experts determined that Betty had suffered 41 axe wounds. The murder weapon was found just a meter away from her, Betty's face was so badly damaged that the only way to identify her was through dental records. One of her hands, which may have been used to cover her face during the attack, was nearly severed. Most of her injuries occurred after her death. The violent nature of the attack suggested that the attacker knew Betty well. There was no sign of robbery or abuse. It appeared to be a personally motivated attack. Unfortunately, DNA evidence was of no help to the police at the time. The murder shocked the entire city, which had never experienced a homicide before. People were scared, worried that a dangerous criminal might be lurking in their neighborhood. Residents were eager to help the police catch the brutal killer, but the investigation was just beginning. At the time of the investigation, advanced technologies such as DNA testing, surveillance cameras, and cell phone tracking had not yet been developed. The police focused on Betty's surroundings, examining her relationships with her family and neighbors, but everyone had a solid alibi. Upon hearing of the tragedy, Alan immediately called Candy, knowing that his eldest daughter was staying at her house overnight. He checked to make sure the child was safe and shared the sad news about his wife. Candy feigned shock upon hearing the news of Betty's death. Forensic experts were working at Betty's house, trying to collect any evidence to link the events. They later discovered a fingerprint on the refrigerator door, along with bloodstains that clearly showed a shoe print. The police focused on Alan as the prime suspect, since it is not uncommon for a husband to kill his wife. It was believed that the murder may have occurred in a fit of rage. Meanwhile, the police arrived at Candy's house. She remained completely calm. However, upon hearing that the police had discovered a shoe print in Betty's house, she quickly tore it into small pieces and threw it in a trash can a few blocks away. When Alan returned home, he was questioned by the police. Alan was asked about possible infidelity. He maintained that he was faithful to his wife and insisted that she could not have had an affair. After questioning, he was released, but the next day he returned to the police to confess to the lies regarding the infidelity, which he said troubled him. The police discovered that there was, in fact, an affair involving Betty's best friend Candy. Furthermore, he mentioned that he had decided to end the relationship himself, which could have been a motive, to have visited Betty on the day of the murder to pick up a swimsuit. Police discovered that she was the last person known to have seen Betty alive. Additionally, the time of Candy's visit coincided with the estimated time of Betty's death. Meanwhile, Alan had a solid alibi, as he was out of town on business during the incident. As a result, Candy became the prime suspect and was brought in for questioning. She admitted to going to Betty's house that morning, where they chatted and had coffee together. According to Candy, nothing unusual happened, and she left with her swimsuit about 30 minutes later. She acknowledged having had an affair, but stated that the relationship had ended long ago. Both Candy and Alan insisted that Betty did not know about the affair. The experienced police suspected that Candy was hiding important information. They offered her a lie detector test, but she refused, apparently terrified, which only heightened the police's suspicions. The fingerprints collected at the crime scene matched Candy's. On June 26, Candy was arrested for murder, but her husband posted a $100,000 bail, allowing her to be released the following day. Case documents were collected and reviewed over the next week, during which the attorney began to formulate a defense strategy, knowing that a trial was inevitable. The entire city was shocked to learn of the killer's identity, but many refused to believe it, and even helped her husband raise money for bail. No one could have imagined Candy wielding an axe and attacking her best friend, Betty. Although she initially denied any involvement in Betty's death, she later confessed to the attack on the advice of her attorney. The confession came under circumstances that, under state law, likely allowed her to avoid punishment. The case was widely reported in the media. According to the prosecutor's office, Candy stated that she had visited Betty to pick up a swimsuit for her daughter. During their conversation, Candy suddenly revealed that she had slept with Betty's husband. Betty then went down to the basement to get some things, and Candy followed her. While in the basement, a struggle broke out between them, during which Betty brandished a weapon to attack Candy. Candy suffered multiple cuts on her hands while trying to defend herself until Betty finally struck her in the head. Candy believed she had sustained severe scalp injuries and experienced temporary amnesia. She claimed to have suffered several other injuries as well, but somehow managed to retrieve the axe. She did not remember what happened next, and only regained consciousness after washing off the blood in the bathroom. To avoid facing the consequences of her actions, she changed into Betty's clothes and chose not to go back to the basement. The prosecutor's office found this argument hard to believe because of the violence involved in the case. The extent of Betty's injuries suggested that this was a serious crime and not self-defense against an aggressive friend. The prosecution argued that it was a premeditated murder motivated by jealousy. Furthermore, there were very few injuries on Candy's body. Only a scratch on her toe was noted. The trial began on October 20, 1980, and attracted considerable media attention, filling the courtroom with over 200 people. The defense presented several witnesses, including pastors and church members, who testified that Candy was a loving mother, wife, and good person. Candy testified confidently and answered every question without hesitation or confusion. The jury called an independent psychiatrist from Houston, who used hypnosis during the evaluation. He supported the defense's argument, stating that she had unconsciously been in a rage due to a head injury related to a childhood incident. The psychiatrist argued that in her rage, Candy unconsciously recalled a traumatic memory from her childhood, which led to her violent emotional reaction. The independent experts concluded that Candy had unintentionally killed Betty. Alan, Betty's husband, testified in Candy's defense during the trial. Alan mentioned that in the last days of Betty's life, her mental health had declined. She was struggling with postpartum depression and was irritable. Betty believed that her husband had been unfaithful, but he denied it, although he had ended the affair. Candy's attorney used this testimony to argue that Betty was in a state of mental instability, driven by her husband's supposed infidelity, which led her to try to harm Candy. The jury found these arguments persuasive. After deliberating for over 3 hours, the jury found Candy Montgomery not guilty. Betty's family and friends were shocked and shouted angry comments at Candy as she left. This was her attorney's first criminal case, and the outcome was a surprising victory for the defense. Alan later remarried, but his second marriage ended quickly. Candy and Pat, her husband, felt compelled to leave the city due to pressure from the local community, and they moved to Georgia with their children to start over. Over the years, the couple tried to save their relationship, but eventually they separated. After the split, Candy chose to return to her maiden name to avoid public scrutiny. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Leslie Reeves. On November 20, 2021, Leslie Reeves and Chris Smith met at a bar where Chris was performing as the lead singer of a band. After their initial meeting, Chris invited Leslie back to the bar for a friendly get-together. What started as a casual dinner quickly turned into something more, as they both felt a strong attraction to each other. They met again on November 24, 2021, just before Thanksgiving, at their favorite bar. The bar was packed, but they had made reservations. Those who were there that night remembered Chris and Leslie as a fun couple, full of laughter and conversation, with no signs of conflict between them. Leslie and Chris then got ready and went to his house. Leslie felt comfortable being alone with Chris, as he had made a positive impression on her. Additionally, Leslie was very good at defending herself, which made her feel safer when visiting him. Chris lived on a farm 100 kilometers away from the bar in Farmer City, Illinois, USA. At around 10 p.m., Leslie sent her friend Nanette Stuber a text message saying that something was wrong, but she did not provide any further details. Coincidentally, Nanette was asleep at the time and did not read the message until the next morning. This turned out to be the last message sent by Leslie Reeves. When Nanette woke up, she was eager to talk to Leslie about her date with Chris. Instead, she was alarmed to see Leslie's disturbing message. Nanette texted back asking what had happened, but Leslie did not respond and ignored all attempts to contact her. This lack of communication made Leslie's friend even more worried. Fortunately, Leslie had shared Chris's address, so Nanette decided to go there to check on her. She headed toward Farmer City while also calling the police. Knowing that the trip would take over an hour, she planned to request a welfare check on Leslie. As Nanette approached the farm, she saw another car parked nearby. It belonged to Chris's friend, who had been trying to contact the band's lead singer and wanted to check on him. They decided to explore the area around the house and look inside. As they approached from behind, they noticed that the door was broken and there was a shattered window. Looking inside, they saw a foot on the floor. Chris's friend quickly ran to his car, grabbed his phone, and called emergency services to report a dead body in the house. When the police arrived, they discovered even more heartbreaking scenes. Chris was the first to be brought out. He was alive but severely injured, covered in blood and struggling to breathe. Doctors feared he might not survive the trip to the hospital. The second victim, a woman who had accompanied him from the bar, was taken out. Chris was a local celebrity, the lead singer of a band. Forensic investigators and the sheriff began their work at the farm, while Nanette waited outside in her car. Confused and anxious, she tried to figure out what had happened to her friend, but no one would provide information about Leslie. Overcome with anxiety, Nanette went to the police to share vital information. She explained that the night before Thanksgiving, Leslie had gone on a date with a man named Chris, the first person to be taken from the house. When the police asked to see a photo of her friend, Nanette showed them the pictures on her phone. Then the police delivered the heartbreaking news Leslie had been shot and was dead. However, Chris was still alive but in critical condition and was rushed to the medical center for surgery. Although his condition had stabilized slightly, it was still serious. Police conducted a thorough search of the crime scene, Chris's car, and his personal belongings. They focused particularly on the communication equipment in the home. The scene revealed numerous damaged items, including a broken back door, shattered windows, and a displaced refrigerator. An overturned table and scattered chairs indicated a struggle. Initially, police believed that Chris had attacked Leslie in his own home, leading to a fight that left both of them injured. Leslie died almost instantly, making Chris a suspect. However, further investigation revealed that no weapon was found at the crime scene, which raised suspicions. It appeared that the attacker had been armed. The police concluded that Chris was unlikely to be the attacker, as neither Leslie nor Chris had weapons. Additional findings confirmed that Chris did not attack Leslie. A burned pizza was found, indicating that the couple had planned to cook and eat dinner together that evening before the attack. Evidence suggested that the attacker had come to their home, and that they had attempted to defend themselves. Chris was shot first while Leslie fought back. The chaos around her suggested a struggle. She had been shot once in the head, resulting in her death. Police discovered 2 silver bullet casings from a 9mm handgun, one in the kitchen near Chris's body and one in the living room next to Leslie's. To piece together what had happened, police began investigating Leslie and Chris's backgrounds. Chris Smith was a friendly 48-year-old man who had been divorced less than a year before the shooting. Chris worked in pool construction and also played music with his band. He was known in the community as a kind and dedicated person who devoted himself to singing. Almost everyone recognized him by name and face. He had no legal problems, no history of violence, drug use, or involvement in criminal activity. Leslie believed Chris would be the ideal partner for family life. At the time, Chris lived in a large house in a nearby town with his mother and sister. They described him as a workaholic, spending all of his free time focused on his career. The family was close and deeply saddened by what happened to Chris. They had a dog named Tiki, who doctors said played a key role in Chris's survival that night. During the 12 hours Chris bled out before he was discovered, Tiki lay on top of him, keeping him warm. Experts believe the dog sensed Chris's distress and helped him through the situation. Leslie Reeves, a 40-year-old mother of two, lived about an hour south of Farmersville. She was divorced and had a master's degree in engineering. However, she chose a different path and became a Pilates and women's self-defense instructor. Leslie was very active and used her social media channels to promote her work. When the police asked about potential suspects in Leslie's attack, Nanette provided the most valuable information. Nanette knew Leslie well and recalled that one person who had acted inappropriately was her ex-boyfriend, Robert Tarr. Leslie had ended their relationship long before the attack, but Robert responded by stalking her. He became so persistent that she was forced to block him from her emails, text messages, and phone calls. Although Leslie tried to cut off contact, Robert refused to accept her decision. News of the crime spread throughout the area, eventually reaching a close friend of Leslie's who lived near the city. She confirmed what she had heard and identified Robert Tarr as the only person capable of carrying out such an attack. Leslie's close friend quickly contacted the police to report him, and suspicions against Robert continued to grow. Meanwhile, Chris remained in the hospital. X-rays showed that a bullet had entered his brain between the two hemispheres. If it had traveled just 2 mm deeper, he would have died. When his family learned of the incident, his mother and sisters rushed to the medical center to assist him. The trip took 2 hours, during which they were very worried about him. Chris's relationship with Leslie was short-lived and somewhat unexpected, so most of his relatives were unaware of it. While the doctors worked hard, they had to remove part of Chris's skull to access the soft tissues, remove some of the bone fragments that had penetrated his brain, and extract the bullet. It was time to meet Robert Tarr, a divorced father of 3 living in Collinsville. Thanks to Nanette, they were able to contact him and arrange a meeting. From the beginning, Robert did not question why the police were interested in him and agreed to come to the station without a lawyer. Although the deceased's best friend, Leslie, reported that she had broken up with Robert, he insisted that they were still together, although he admitted that their relationship had problems. Robert denied any involvement in the crime, stating that he had never been to Farmersville and did not know Chris Smith. When questioned about his alibi, he recounted his activities the day before Thanksgiving, claiming that he spent most of the day with a friend until 6:30 p.m., after which he returned home and met only his daughter. However, his alibi was not convincing. There were many holes in his story, and no one could confirm his whereabouts at certain times, making it seem as if he was trying to hide something. The shooting occurred at 1 a.m., while Robert insisted that he had been home long before. Robert's daughter, who was brought to the police station and partially supported his account, said that he had come home around 6:30 p.m., left, and returned around 9 p.m. Robert appeared very upset during questioning. He cried and said that he missed Leslie. His daughter was confused about the situation. The police believed he left to follow Leslie and saw her with a new man named Chris. He stayed with his daughter until she went to bed around 10 p.m. However, at around 2:45 a.m., Robert's daughter woke up to noises in the house. Robert was frantically doing laundry and kept saying he couldn't sleep, which raised suspicions. Robert's daughter also mentioned that her father owned a gun. While the two were at the police station, officers searched their home and discovered a gun. When they showed it to Robert's daughter, she realized that her father had used another gun just the day before. The police checked Robert's movements to verify his alibi. They found that he had filled up his gas tank at a gas station near Farmer about 15 to 20 minutes before the murder, and they obtained a receipt as evidence. Robert was caught on surveillance cameras at various locations as he traveled to the city. This evidence contradicted Robert's earlier claims that he had never heard of Farmersville and had never been there. He was eventually arrested after being caught lying, which allowed the police to detain him and prevent him from fleeing. Chris's family was relieved, as they feared the criminal might return to harm the survivor. Just a day after the arrest, more circumstantial evidence against Robert continued to emerge, and the police believed they had the right man. Robert's lawyer quickly appeared on television to discuss the case, asserting his client's innocence. Robert's story changed rapidly. He claimed that at 6:40 p.m., Leslie called him out of the blue, asking for a ride to a friend's house in Farmersville. He said he arrived at 7:30 p.m., dropped Leslie off near Chris's house, and then returned home. He explained his earlier lies by saying that he was afraid of attracting police attention. Robert claimed that he had simply picked up Leslie and left, insisting that he had not shot anyone. However, the timeline did not match his daughter's account. He stated that there was tension between his daughter and Leslie, so he did not want to worry her any further. In contrast, Robert's daughter described Leslie as a kind woman, and they quickly formed a close bond. Meanwhile, Robert's web of lies continued to grow. He attempted to challenge the police's theories while speaking to reporters, arguing that the police had found no glass or blood in the car he was driving, nor was there any other evidence linking him to the murders. Additionally, no DNA samples from the victims were found at the crime scene or in his car. Robert's defense attorneys used these points to support their case. The police desperately needed physical evidence. Ideally, a pistol containing the bullets used in the crime to conduct ballistics testing. Unfortunately, their initial search was unsuccessful. However, a few days later, Robert's daughter contacted the police, stating that she had found the gun he used in the attack. The weapon was safely stored in a thick Ziploc bag and hidden in the yard, possibly to prevent rain damage, suggesting that the perpetrator intended to use it again. The bag contained numerous fingerprints belonging to Robert, making the discovery significant to the investigation. Despite this evidence, Robert maintained his innocence and attempted to manipulate the facts. Although there were numerous fingerprints on the Ziploc bag, there were none on the gun itself, indicating that Robert had attempted to clean it. However, he was not clever enough to dispose of it. Further analysis revealed that he had not cleaned the gun properly, as tiny drops of Leslie's blood were found on it. To justify himself, Robert began telling a story that the gun actually belonged to Leslie and that she had asked him to hide it. He claimed that Leslie had learned how to use a gun. However, her shooting instructor, a friend of Leslie's, refuted Robert's story, stating that he had never seen the weapon with her. Leslie's friend insisted that Leslie did not carry a gun for self-defense on that date. If she had had a gun with her, the attacker would not have been able to leave alive. She would have been able to defend herself. Despite everything, Robert maintains his innocence. The outcome depends on the survivor's memory. Chris Smith, the prosecution's main witness, survived the brutal attack but remains in a drug-induced coma. Doctors report some positive progress, but it is too early to make any predictions about his recovery. While waiting for Chris to regain consciousness, Robert's cellmate approached the police with a disturbing confession. He revealed that Robert tried to hire him as a hitman to kill Chris Smith and the chief prosecutor for $110,000, even paying $10,000 up front. In response, security at the hospital was increased. Investigations were conducted thoroughly, but no evidence supporting the attack was discovered. Robert claims that he never considered hiring a hitman. He stated that he gave $10,000, but it was to bail out a friend. However, this raises the question of why Robert would hand over such a large sum to someone he barely knew. Regardless, Robert's situation only worsened. To clarify the matter, they had to wait until Chris regained consciousness. Thankfully, he opened his eyes in early January 2022, about 2 months after the attack. This marked the beginning of his long recovery process. Chris had to relearn basic skills such as walking, eating, and talking. He approached the rehabilitation process with determination, demonstrating strong physical abilities from the start. Unfortunately, his cognitive recovery did not go smoothly. After waking from the coma, He faced significant memory gaps, especially regarding the night of the attack. He couldn't even remember who Leslie was, or recall anything about that evening. Additionally, Chris had to live with a bullet lodged in his brain. Doctors couldn't remove the bullet due to the risks involved. They found that attempting surgery could cause damage to the surrounding area, potentially leading to serious consequences. As he continued to deal with memory issues, Robert's trial was set for April 2024. At the start of the hearing, prosecutors claimed that Robert had intentionally gone to Chris's house to kill Leslie Reeves after seeing them together that evening. Evidence showed that he had been following Leslie throughout the night, suspecting she was with someone else. When he discovered that she was dating a new man, he became extremely angry. Police found numerous text messages between him and his best friend, in which Robert frequently expressed his frustration with Leslie, particularly that evening. It was evident that he was affected by the situation. Until the very end, he still believed he was in a relationship with her and viewed Leslie's date with Chris and their trip home as a betrayal. After witnessing how happy Leslie and Chris were together, Robert returned home, where his daughter found him crying. Knowing that the couple had gone to Farmersville, he grabbed a gun and went to Chris's house. Robert entered through the back door, but was quickly spotted, leading to an attempt to stop him. A struggle ensued, resulting in a broken window. Robert then armed himself. Leslie and Chris attempted to defend themselves by pushing the refrigerator to block their path. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. Chris tried to shield Leslie but was shot, and shortly after, Leslie suffered the same fate. Robert's attorneys attempted to counter the prosecutor's claims. The defense emphasized the lack of direct evidence, portraying the case as a fabrication. They argued to the jury that the investigation was focused solely on accusing Robert of assaulting two people. In fact, there was no evidence at the crime scene directly linking Robert to the crime. Chris, a key witness, could not recall the events of that night and chose not to attend the trial, claiming that he did not remember anything. The prosecution's strongest evidence was a container found at Robert's home that held the bullets used in the attack on Leslie and Chris. Furthermore, Robert was responsible for packing and hiding the gun. He chose not to testify, which his attorney described as a strategic move. Additionally, the defense did not present any witnesses. After hearing the arguments, the jury deliberated for 3 hours and reached a unanimous verdict, finding Robert Tarr guilty of first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 85 years in prison, eligible for parole after 72 years, meaning he will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. At this point, Chris finally took the stand in court and spoke about the impact the shooting had on him and his family. This tragic event completely destroyed Chris's life. At 49, he was never able to return to his beloved construction job. While he was in the hospital, his home was completely looted, and even his swimming pool was stolen. After his release, he auctioned off his home, which was later demolished, leaving only an empty lot. He now bore the responsibility of providing for his family. Friends and family remain hopeful that Chris Smith can rebuild his life, but there is a strong possibility that he will never be the same again. While waiting for his memory to improve, he practices every day and learns to do without assistance. Eventually, Chris regained his position as the lead singer in his band. However, the after effects of that senseless attack continue to haunt him as he recovers. The left side of his body remains paralyzed, and he has sought help from a leading medical research center. Chris is eager to participate in advanced research to aid his recovery. He is currently writing a book about his experiences, focusing on domestic violence. Leslie's children are in the care of her ex-husband. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Rachel Maidens. Rachel Maidens and Randy live in a large mansion. The 600-acre estate is located in one of the most affluent and respected areas of the city. Their home is like a fortress, providing a safe environment for both family life and business. Rachel Maidens, a successful orthodontist, owns a private practice in the city's downtown area. She is known for her beauty, being a natural blonde, and is a devoted mother to her daughter Natalie, who attends a private Catholic school. After completing her undergraduate degree, Rachel went on to dental school in Florida. Throughout her studies, she received numerous accolades for her accomplishments, including a prestigious scholarship. She completed her residency at Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C., marking the culmination of her education. Despite her young age, Rachel's thriving career has allowed her to establish her own practice, publish articles in peer-reviewed journals, and speak regularly at conferences. Not everything in Rachel's life has been a success. During her college years, her father was arrested for selling illegal banned substance. Despite being a respected pharmacist, he became involved in the sale of prescription drugs. Faced with the shame of his arrest, and before an investigation could be launched, he tragically chose to take his own life just 2 days later. The family's ordeal did not end there. The police continued their investigation, which resulted in the freezing of bank accounts belonging to Rachel, her mother, and her brother. This investigation dragged on for years, culminating in Rachel's mother being ordered to pay a $15,000 fine, marking a dark period in Rachel's life. Many friends and family members noted that these events had a significant negative impact on her emotional health. Despite these challenges, Rachel did not let them stop her from pursuing career success. She faced these difficulties with resilience, continuing to strive for personal and professional growth. Determined to excel in her field, Rachel overcame her family's financial crisis, dealt with the tragic loss of her father, and ultimately regained control of her life. Her husband, Randy Maidens, grew up in Georgia. After completing his education, he attended Georgia Tech and eventually became a well-paid pharmaceutical sales manager. However, he lost his job. Randy began struggling with alcoholism, and Rachel suspected that he was also using various illegal substances, which made the situation worse. During this time, multiple witnesses saw Randy enter a restaurant in an intoxicated state, disturbing both customers and employees. One employee felt the need to call 911. The employee recognized him as Randy Maidens, as he frequently visited the restaurant with his wife. Minutes after the first call, she called 911 again to express her growing concern. She mentioned that Randy had accidentally dropped several disturbing items from his pocket, including a shotgun shell casing and a large bottle that looked like a painkiller, such as Tylenol, prompting the police to rush to the scene. Randy attempted to leave the restaurant, but the staff convinced him to stay. When the police arrived, they noticed that he was acting strangely, although they could not determine whether he was simply drunk or under the influence of something stronger. Randy appeared concerned and tried to explain that his wife needed him to go home. When the restaurant staff offered to call his wife, he refused to provide her phone number. He then attempted to get into his car, but the police stopped him. They searched his vehicle and discovered a handgun in the back seat. Despite the unusual circumstances, he was not arrested. Several witnesses noted that someone had helped him into his car that night, preventing him from driving while intoxicated. On the evening of April 21, 2013, Elizabeth Frisbee, Rachel's mother, called the Brentwood Police Department, asking them to check on her daughter's home. Elizabeth had been trying to contact Rachel for a long time, but when she called, Randy answered and refused to let her speak to her daughter. Frustrated, the mother threatened to call the police. The police quickly arrived at Rachel's house and found that all the blinds were drawn, making it impossible to see inside. No one answered when they knocked, but they discovered the garage door open, allowing them to enter the house. They called for Rachel and Randy, but neither was present. They were surprised to hear screams coming from the second floor. A 2-year-old girl named Natalie was crying there. While checking the second floor, a police officer entered the hallway leading to the master bedroom. The scene was tragic. Rachel had been murdered. Randy quickly became the prime suspect and was placed on the search list. To prevent him from escaping, helicopters and special forces were dispatched to the area. The upscale neighborhood resembled a scene from a Hollywood movie as the police teamed up with Rachel's neighbors to track down Randy. Police informed Rachel's relatives, who picked up her daughter, Natalie. Randy was considered particularly dangerous due to his recent erratic behavior, and it was believed he was still armed, which led to heightened alerts. Neighbors reported witnessing him behaving inappropriately on several occasions. A note was found on the kitchen table. In it, Randy sincerely apologized to his daughter and expressed his deep love for her. He mentioned that he had to run away because of a terrible act he had committed, although he did not explain what that act was. Randy expressed his gratitude to his wife's relatives for the years they had shared. He revealed that he could no longer bear the daily humiliation he faced from his wife. For 6 years, he had felt emotionally tormented every evening. That night, his wife began to provoke him again, pushing him over the edge. Randy, a loving father, wanted to protect his daughter, Natalie. He also stated that he wished to give custody to Rachel's relatives. When the police examined the note, Randy was still missing. Some experts believed the letter could be both a confession and a final goodbye, complicating the search by raising the possibility that he may have died. Interestingly, a car belonging to Randy was found in the private driveway of the mansion. Inside the trunk, police discovered $87,000 in cash packed in a large bag. Additionally, about $10,000 more was uncovered through phone records. Police learned that on the night of the murder, Randy had called his lawyer. It seems his original plan was to kill his wife and escape with the money to start over. However, something went wrong. Why didn't he take his car? What stopped him? Police began to suspect that this might have been related to calls from Rachel's mother, Elizabeth. She contacted the police, which could have thwarted Randy's plans. The police were surprised that the search for Randy did not last long. Just 12 hours after it began, he walked out of the woods behind his house with his hands up and surrendered to the police without a fight. He immediately blamed his wife and the pressure he felt from her behavior. He defended himself by stating that he was Rachel's third husband, as the previous two could not tolerate her constant nagging. However, this did not excuse the 10 shots he fired into her back. Following his wife's murder, it was discovered that he had recently faced several legal issues due to minor offenses. A few months before the tragic incident, Randy was stopped by the police for driving under the influence, but he refused to take a breathalyzer test. By law, this refusal is considered an admission of drunk driving. He subsequently caused a drunk driving accident, crashing into a substation and cutting off power to nearly 200 homes for hours. In the weeks before Rachel was murdered, a neighbor spotted a man wearing a ski mask running through the woods with 2 dogs, near the area where Randy later surrendered to the police. When the neighbor approached the man, she recognized him as Randy. After speaking to him, she quickly realized he appeared to be very intoxicated or possibly under the influence of banned substance. Randy claimed he was walking his dog and got lost. The neighbor noticed he had something like a bow and arrow in his backpack, which made her feel unsafe, so she left. Randy had been seen engaging in similar behavior on several occasions, causing concern among residents, particularly those living near Randy's family, who feared for their safety. In January 2013, at a work conference in Orlando, which he attended with Rachel, Randy went to a bar one evening and became intoxicated. When the staff asked him to leave, he responded by smashing dishes and swearing. Several witnesses reported hearing him threaten to kill his wife during this outburst. Several customers tried to help by escorting him out, but he started fighting again, prompting them to call the police. He was eventually arrested for disorderly conduct and public intoxication, but was released the following day. The pharmaceutical company he worked for was very concerned about its reputation after this incident. One of his co-workers, who wished to remain anonymous, suggested that he take a medical leave of absence, but Randy ignored the advice and returned to work after 3 days. As a result, he was fired. During the investigation, the police worked extensively with Randy's colleagues. According to them, Randy's behavior began to change dramatically a few months before Rachel was murdered. Although he never explained the reason for this change, he often complained about his wife and blamed her for his problems. However, those around him found it hard to believe that his wife could push him to such extremes, as Rachel always appeared sweet and calm. At the time of the murder, Randy's ex-girlfriend was trying to reconnect with him. They had dated in high school, but had drifted apart over time. Now divorced and reminiscing about their past, she wanted to rekindle their relationship as adults. She was aware of the family problems Randy was facing and believed that his situation would eventually lead to divorce. Randy's ex-girlfriend was surprised by the recent events in his life and felt she could help him get back on track. Having known him for over 10 years, they had maintained a friendship throughout that time. She saw Randy as a caring and intelligent man who valued his family and loved his daughter. However, she also knew about the more troubled aspects of his life. She was aware that he had endured a difficult childhood, living with an alcoholic father who abused him, and had a strained relationship with his mother. These circumstances contributed to his reluctance to leave his daughter Natalie in the care of relatives. Randy's ex-girlfriend suspected that his marital problems and challenging childhood had affected him, leading to his need for support. Co-workers at the company where Randy worked noted that they had known about his struggles with substance abuse long before the incident. Both co-workers and management reported that he openly acknowledged his struggle with addiction. Although he was believed to have overcome these challenges in the years leading up to the attack, he eventually relapsed. What caused Randy's shocking behavior that led to his wife's murder? Shortly after his arrest, Randy was charged with first-degree murder. He also faced charges of endangering the life of a child. Additionally, he was charged with tampering with evidence for attempting to remove bloodstains and hide the blanket he used. Police believe he was attempting to destroy evidence of the crime and intended to flee. Randy was initially released on a $25 million bail while awaiting trial. His attorney sought to have his bail lowered and to ensure he was released on house arrest, arguing that Randy was a victim of his wife's control. The attorney pointed out that although a significant amount of cash was found in Randy's car, there was no evidence, such as documents or cards, indicating that he was planning to leave the city. The defense claimed that Randy had multiple opportunities to escape, but chose not to. However, the prosecutor's office disagreed. They had a witness who initially claimed to have heard Randy discuss plans to flee to Mexico, but this testimony was later proven false. Meanwhile, Rachel's mother filed a civil lawsuit against Randy to block him from accessing joint accounts and assets with his wife. She feared that Randy might evade justice by bribing officials with family assets. Despite the challenges, the situation eventually turned in Randy's favor. The attorney successfully negotiated a significant reduction in bail to $750,000, which Randy promptly paid. He would remain free for at least another year and a half while he awaited further hearings, with a trial set for September 2014. Surprisingly, the judge allowed him to continue living in the house where Rachel was murdered. However, this arrangement came with complications. He had to comply with bail conditions that required him to notify the police at least 24 hours before entering the house. Additionally, he was required to have an attorney with him at all times and wear a GPS tracking bracelet on his ankle. He was also prohibited from contacting his daughter and Rachel's family. Meanwhile, Rachel's mother continued her legal battle while awaiting a decision on her civil lawsuit. She eventually obtained a court order freezing the couple's assets. Despite this, Randy entered the home and took her belongings, leading to a new charge of contempt of court. However, thanks to the efforts of his attorney, the charge was dismissed. During the investigation, it was discovered that Randy had not simply fled into the woods after the murder. Several neighbors reported that the morning after the incident, they found evidence of attempts to break into their homes through both the garage door and the front door. Police reviewed surveillance video from a nearby club and confirmed that Randy was the one trying to approach the neighbors. He posed a significant threat, but he denied the allegations. Over time, the situation was de-escalated. Judges who allowed Randy, who was clearly out of control, to remain free for a year and a half faced criticism. During this time, he lived in an apartment complex in Bellevue, a suburb of Nashville. A resident reported an incident involving Randy, who attempted to enter the building by knocking on the door and pretending to be a police officer. The resident refused to open the door but heard Randy attempting to enter other apartments. Concerned, he called the police. When they arrived, they found Randy extremely intoxicated. The next day, the judge revoked his bail. Incredibly, Randy's erratic and intoxicated behavior continued both before and after the murder of his wife. The fear that Randy's neighbors felt over the past year, especially when they learned that he had been released on bail and would be living next door to them in his family's mansion, was palpable. It seemed as though justice would soon be served, as his crimes were punishable by death under Tennessee law. However, his skilled defense attorney had a strategic plan. On September 29, 2014, Randy reached a plea deal with the prosecution, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and child neglect. As a result, he was sentenced to just 25 years in prison, less than half of the maximum sentence of 60 years for those charges. In addition, his attorney managed to secure the possibility of parole, which could be granted if he demonstrated good behavior in prison. Since Randy was 42 at the time of his sentencing, he was likely to be released around the age of 60. During the trial, Randy Maidens expressed his remorse to Rachel's family, stating that he had promised to love and cherish everyone, but had betrayed that promise. He felt he would have to live with this pain forever, and he believed there was no prison worse than the one he had brought upon himself. Randy also sincerely apologized to all of Rachel's family and friends for the pain and suffering he had caused them. Rachel's mother felt deeply offended by the court's decision. She appealed to the High Court several times to review the sentence and impose a harsher penalty, but her efforts were unsuccessful. Rachel's family was shocked by the decisions made during the investigation and trial. Her mother and brother spoke out in the media to express their displeasure, emphasizing their sadness over Rachel's tragic and brutal death as a beautiful, successful woman. They protested the seemingly unreasonable decisions of the justice system, which appeared to favor the criminal. Randy had never been charged with contempt of court, tampering with evidence, or previous offenses such as drunk driving. In response to the family's statements, Randy's attorney expressed his client's sincere regret and condolences. However, Rachel's mother felt that these words were insincere and did not comfort her or bring Rachel back. Their daughter, Natalie, will inherit her parents' fortune when she comes of age. Hello, friends. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Paulson. Jennifer Paulson was born on June 23, 1979, in Washington, USA. She grew up in a close-knit family filled with love and warmth. Jennifer has two older brothers and shares a strong bond with them. She was a kind child who absorbed everything around her and made friends easily. As a result, she had a large circle of friends and could connect with anyone, regardless of their differences. Jennifer graduated from the Christian Academy, where she excelled academically. She was always eager to help her classmates who were struggling with their studies. In addition to her academic achievements, Jennifer was active in extracurricular activities. She published the weekly school news, tutored part-time, and participated in volleyball, basketball, and softball. A prominent feature of Jennifer and her family was their strong faith. She attended church services every Sunday. After graduating, she attended Seattle Pacific University, about an hour's drive from her parents' home. She set her sights on becoming a teacher, wanting to use her academic achievements to help her community. She excelled in school, earning a bachelor's degree in teaching and then a master's degree in education. During her time in college, Jennifer also volunteered with low-income families, focusing on helping children prepare for college. She has always believed that education is the key to building a successful future. After graduating, Jennifer sought employment and began her career as a substitute teacher at Pierce County Schools. Eager to advance her career, she worked hard to secure a permanent teaching position. She was soon hired by several schools, and in 2004, she became a full-time teacher at Hunt Middle School and Stanley Elementary School. In 2007, she joined Burney Elementary School, where she dedicated herself to teaching children with special needs and quickly became a favorite among the fifth graders. She believed that everyone deserved a chance at a better future, and helping them achieve that was her true calling as a teacher. She worked with students who faced serious challenges, including fifth graders who were still unable to read. Jennifer had an extremely busy schedule, balancing her teaching responsibilities with her efforts to support her students. While still attending college, she worked part-time at the cafeteria on campus. There, she met a new transfer student from another school named Jed Waits. He also worked at the cafeteria, and those who knew him well had nothing negative to say about him. One striking trait that people who don't know Jed will notice is his unusual style of dress. He often appears somber and frequently wears black. His friends believe that this preference for dark clothing stems from his creative eccentricity, which has been evident since a young age. Jed is an artist involved in a variety of creative activities. He has acted in plays, drawn cartoons for newspapers and yearbooks, and enjoys creating posters and flyers for youth groups. Jed is artistically gifted and can quickly come up with unique creative projects and execute them efficiently. This ability has earned him the respect of his teachers. Additionally, he leads his church's youth group and meets with students monthly to discuss spiritual topics and explore the Bible. Overall, he is a kind and optimistic person. When Jennifer met Jed, they worked together and socialized in the same group, where others often found Jed uncomfortable to talk to. His jokes were frequently considered inappropriate, dark, and confusing. Additionally, he was sometimes rude, even to Jennifer. Although there was no romantic relationship between them, it was clear that Jed had feelings for her. Jennifer, on the other hand, showed no interest in pursuing any relationship. She focused on her studies and had found a job that took up most of her free time. One day at school, Jed decided to express his feelings for Jennifer by asking her out. However, she reiterated what she had told many others before: she was not ready for a relationship until she had established her career. Jed struggled with the rejection, and in a moment of anger, he hit Jennifer, which caused a conflict between them. They resolved their differences amicably but chose to distance themselves, continuing their studies like other students. Both Jennifer and Jed graduated in 2003, with Jennifer earning a degree in special education and Jed earning a degree in English. Their friendship never recovered. In fact, they barely spoke to each other during their final years of school. After graduating from college, Jennifer moved back home with her family, found a job, and began saving money to buy her dream home. She was focused on her goals and wanted to be independent. However, an old acquaintance disrupted her plans. Somehow, Jed Waits discovered Jennifer's home phone number and called her for the first time 2 years after graduation. He said he had served in the National Guard in Kuwait and had just returned from a war zone. Jennifer was polite throughout the conversation and hoped he wouldn't call again, but from that day on, he started calling her frequently. At first, she ignored the calls, thinking he was just bored and contacting everyone, including her. However, she soon became concerned when Jed began calling multiple times a day, distracting and annoying her. When she asked their mutual friends, she learned that Jed didn't call anyone else. Realizing this made her feel uncomfortable. It seemed like he was obsessing over her, which was alarming. Jennifer told Jed that their relationship was impossible and asked him to stop contacting her. However, it seemed like he wasn't listening. Jed continued to call, forcing Jennifer to turn off her phone to avoid his constant calls. Thankfully, her family supported her during this difficult time. Meanwhile, Jed's parents had separated and moved in with new partners. By the fall of 2006, Jennifer Paulson had saved enough money for a down payment on a house and decided to buy one. She found a suitable place a few miles away from her family and was excited to be independent. She also hoped that the move would stop Jed's calls. To her surprise, just a few days after moving into her new home, she answered the phone and heard his familiar, annoying voice. She hadn't even finished unpacking when the calls started again. For days, she ignored him, hoping that this would stop Jed's obsession. However, her relief did not last long. After a while, he continued to call her persistently. This situation reminded Jennifer of her past experiences, and surprisingly, Jed stopped stalking her for about a year. During this time, Jennifer was able to relax and thought that Jed might have found someone else. However, she was shocked when he called her back, acting as if nothing had changed, as if they had just met yesterday. From that point on, Jed continued to contact her regularly, calling about 10 times a day or even more. This pattern of behavior continued for several months before stopping for a long period. This pattern of harassment occurred several times over the years, following a similar trajectory each time. In 2008, Jed started calling her again, and this time it was even more disturbing because he had become more aggressive. Jennifer had no idea how far his obsession had gone until he showed up at her workplace. He casually walked past her office and entered without hesitation. This was the most terrifying experience for Jennifer. She realized that she had never told him where she worked, which meant he had been stalking her. Jed coming to her school and walking among the children terrified her. When she told her father, Ken Paulson, what was happening, he was fed up with Jed's constant harassment. Ken later called Jed and asked him to stay away from his daughter, warning him that there would be consequences if he didn't. Instead of staying away, Jed sent Jennifer a gift at work, a bouquet of flowers and a teddy bear. He later visited her in person again. During this meeting, Jennifer confronted him and asked him to stop coming to the school, warning that she would report him to the police if he continued to stalk her. She was genuinely worried about his obsessive behavior. Jennifer then informed the principal and school staff about the situation because she was concerned for the safety of the students. Everyone was alerted and prepared to call the police if he showed up at the school again. Unfortunately, Jed did not stop. The police were called to the school, and the principal was extremely concerned about the situation. He even contacted Jed's commanding officer in the National Guard, who revealed that Jed had a troubled military background. The commanding officer stated that Jed had served for nearly 2 years, but he had been behaving inappropriately from the beginning. During that time, he had gotten into several fights, spat on his teammates, and attacked his superiors. He was eventually deployed to Kuwait, where he finished his service without any commendation. The main reason for his discharge was a serious mental health issue. Jennifer became extremely concerned for her safety due to Jed's disturbing behavior. She then decided to file for a restraining order. In the application, she detailed Jed's inappropriate behavior, including repeated phone calls and unusual visits to her workplace. Jennifer Paulson was granted a restraining order, which legally prohibited Jed from coming within 300 meters of her, either at home or at work. While the order provided some peace of mind, Jennifer knew that it would not fully protect her if the harassment continued. She hoped that the police would respond more forcefully, which eased her concerns somewhat. Although she was frightened, she was prepared to take legal action against Jed if necessary. Jed was informed of the restraining order and the serious consequences he would face if he violated it. By this time, Jennifer was emotionally exhausted and showing signs of stress, but with the restraining order in place, she felt more secure in her life. Jennifer was shocked to see Jed's car honking at her in her rearview mirror. She quickly called 911 and explained that there was a restraining order against him and that she felt threatened. Eventually, the police advised her to drive calmly to the station. When she arrived, the police and their cars were waiting for Jed, who was arrested and taken in for immediate questioning. However, he denied the charges and refused to admit to any allegations related to stalking. While awaiting a court decision, the judge ordered Jed to be held in jail but set bail at $10,000. Normally, Bail for such charges is around $2,000, but Jed's unpredictable and dangerous behavior prompted the judge to increase it significantly. Unfortunately, this precaution did not keep Jed in jail, as he was able to post bail. For days after his arrest, Jennifer and her family learned that he had been released. Everyone was in a panic. Jennifer chose not to return home, where she would be alone, and she did not go to work until the situation was resolved. She decided to stay with her family for support during this uncertain time. Jennifer decided to visit her mother. When she arrived, her mother greeted her in tears, expressing her fear that Jed would prevent her from entering the house. Jennifer was also very emotional but immediately expressed her desire to pray for Jed in this situation. She remained optimistic and kind, following her family's advice and staying with relatives. Her brothers planned to protect her at home by taking turns watching over her. However, Jennifer did not want to be confined to the house. She planned to continue working and could not abandon her students. On Friday at 7:30 a.m., Jennifer went to work, preparing to teach her first class of the day. About 400 students, from grades 1 through 5, along with teachers and staff, were at the school, unaware that they were in grave danger. Since 5:30 a.m., Jed had been nearby, parked in a hidden spot while he monitored the roads leading to the school, waiting for the right moment to approach his target. Jennifer arrived safely at work, parked in her usual spot, and walked toward the school. Everything seemed normal. Meanwhile, Jed got out of his car. As he approached her, he suddenly pulled out a gun and shot her in the back. She screamed and collapsed on the asphalt, and he shot her 7 more times. A man who lived across the street witnessed the horrific scene through his window. He heard her scream but couldn't get there in time to help her. Jed then pointed his gun at a passerby and fired, but the man miraculously dodged the bullet. News outlets reported on the shooting at the school where Jennifer worked, urging locals to stay indoors unless absolutely necessary, as the shooter had fled. At the time, no details were available about the victims. Jennifer's father received the call, and her parents quickly drove to the school. They were horrified to learn that Jed had finally achieved his goal and were even more devastated to learn of Jennifer's death. The attack caused chaos, allowing the perpetrator to flee by car. Fortunately, several witnesses saw his face and got a good look at the car he used to escape. He was quickly identified as Jed Waits, the person against whom Jennifer had a restraining order. Only 20 minutes had passed when one of the patrol officers stopped Jed's car about 10 kilometers from the school where he had just killed Jennifer Paulson. The officers were cautious during the arrest, but the situation quickly escalated. Jed refused to surrender. He pulled out a gun and opened fire on the officers. Fortunately, the officers were prepared and returned fire immediately. Thankfully, no officers were injured. Jed was found to be carrying multiple weapons, possibly because he had anticipated a confrontation with the police. The patrol officers shot him multiple times, but the injuries were not fatal. Tragically, 30-year-old Jed Waits took his own life. When his family was informed of the incident, they were shocked. They had no idea that Jed had been involved in such activities for years. They could not believe that a once kind person had become a stalker and a murderer. Jed's family was profoundly affected by the school shooting. His parents were devastated, regretting that they had not been aware of Jed's problems and had not sought professional help sooner. For days after the tragedy, more than 1,500 mourners attended Jennifer Paulson's funeral at the city's cathedral, including friends, family, and classmates. She was well loved. Many of Jennifer's students were deeply saddened by the loss, as her family viewed her as a beacon of hope for their future. In memory of Jennifer Paulson, a garden was created on the school grounds, which remains to this day. About 50 students, mostly from her class, along with their families, contributed to the creation of the garden, each processing their loss in their own way. Jennifer's family struggled to come to terms with her tragic death. Her father, Ken Paulson, wanted to honor her memory by helping others. He spent years creating legislation to better protect victims of stalking, which he called the Jennifer Paulson Law. His main goal was to speed up the government's response to these cases to prevent similar incidents from happening again. The law also classifies online stalking as in-person stalking. Additionally, Ken advocated for public disclosure of information about individuals with a history of stalking, allowing people to check their acquaintances against available databases. If Jennifer had access to this information, she might have learned about his past troubles. In November 2008, after a court ordered Jed not to contact her, he attacked another girl. Although she narrowly escaped death and was seriously injured, the police did not intervene to stop Jed. As a result, he continued to stalk Jennifer. In the United States, victims of stalking are often required to provide evidence of stalking and harassment. In many cases, authorities simply issue warnings. When the initiative was finally enacted into law, Ken felt satisfied, believing it would save countless victims from the tragic consequences of stalking. Although he knew it would not bring back the life of his beloved daughter, Jennifer, who had died at the age of 30. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Mindy Berenyi. Mindy Berenyi grew up in a small farming town in Antwerp, Ohio, in a middle-class family. Her mother, Shirley, met her future husband, Andy, while she was still in school. At the time, Andy was 18 and had completed his auto mechanic training, while Shirley was 17 and still in high school. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they married just a few months after meeting. Shortly after their marriage, Shirley discovered that she was pregnant by another man she had dated before meeting Andy. She had not been unfaithful to Andy, it was simply the result of a previous relationship. Shirley hesitated for a long time, but eventually, Andy accepted both her and the baby as his family. The couple stayed together for 15 years and had 3 children during their marriage. 2 of the children were Andy's, while the eldest was from Shirley's previous relationship. However, after 15 years of marriage, they decided to divorce. Shirley, feeling she could no longer cope as a single mother, gave up custody of all 3 children. The children went to live with Andy, their father. Mindy always loved her father. However, disturbing changes began to disrupt her life. When Mindy was about 9 years old, her father called her into his bedroom and asked her to give him a massage. Years later, Mindy realized this was the beginning of the abuse. At the time, she did not fully understand what was happening and complied, even though she felt something was wrong. She later recalled that it did not feel like a normal massage. Eventually, Mindy refused to go to her father's bedroom. From that point on, Andy's treatment of her became much harsher. Andy began to manipulate his children emotionally, insulting them and even resorting to physical violence. This caused Mindy's brothers to leave the house. Andy eventually remarried, which seemed to improve the strained family relationships, but nothing truly changed. He continued to exert tight control over Mindy, especially as she grew older. Like any teenager, Mindy wanted to spend time with her friends, but her father would not allow it. His behavior became increasingly controlling and manipulative. When Mindy got a job at a nearby McDonald's, Andy kept a close eye on her. He tracked the mileage on his car when she drove, frequently searched her room, and even recorded and listened to Mindy's phone conversations. When Andy was away from home, he turned off his phone to prevent his daughter from communicating with anyone without his supervision. She wanted to stay in touch with her friends and live like a normal teenager, but this angered her father. He would eavesdrop on Mindy's conversations and immediately disconnect her phone from the network if he heard something he disliked. He demanded complete obedience from her, but Mindy refused to comply. When Mindy turned 16, Andy's behavior became increasingly dangerous. He would grab and strangle her when she resisted his control. He would throw her around and beat her while trying to avoid leaving any evidence. The situation worsened when Andy discovered she was pregnant, although the identity of the father was unknown. Mindy was devastated, unable to imagine raising a child in such a hostile environment. Her father's abusive behavior had become unbearable, and she feared for her life and well-being. That same day, Mindy stormed into Andy's upstairs bedroom and grabbed a shotgun hanging on the wall. She then ran into the bathroom, intending to take her own life. Andy was not home at the time, but by the time Mindy changed her mind and decided to put the shotgun away to avoid her father's detection, it was too late. When Andy walked in and saw his daughter holding the gun, he immediately flew into a rage. Mindy later said she was terrified and thought she was in serious trouble. Andy turned away to close the door, saying he would deal with her right away. Moments later, a gunshot rang out. At approximately 4:16 p.m. on September 27th, Joni, Andy's second wife, called the police. When police arrived at the scene, they found Andy lying on the floor. Mindy claimed that she had acted in self-defense. According to Mindy, she had endured years of abuse, along with constant psychological pressure and total control from her abusive father, Andy, who would punish her for even the smallest mistakes. In an attempt to defend herself, she accidentally shot and killed her father. Lawyers accepted her testimony and planned to fight for her acquittal. However, a significant challenge was that Mindy rarely spoke about her struggles or the abuse she endured. Her father, Andy, had restricted her interactions with others, only allowing her to communicate with others when he was supervised. As a result, she had no opportunity to confide in her friends or anyone else about her situation. Additionally, there were no bruises or injuries on her body. This lack of evidence created serious obstacles to convincing the jury that this was indeed a case of self-defense. Shirley, Mindy's mother, supported her daughter's testimony. Mindy had repeatedly complained about her father's abusive behavior, but Shirley had dismissed each time as isolated incidents. Mindy would then reassure her mother that everything was fine, leading her to believe that her daughter was exaggerating. Now, Mindy claimed that her father had threatened her, and Shirley admitted that Andy had behaved similarly throughout their marriage. While at the police station, Shirley revealed that she had also suffered abusive behavior from her husband, which was the main reason for their divorce. However, she did not expect that Andy would use the same tactics on their daughter. The situation became even more complicated when Mindy faced information isolation. She was unable to socialize comfortably with others and could only occasionally spend a few minutes on the phone without Andy's supervision. Despite everything, Shirley supported her daughter. Andy's second wife, Joni, who had been married to him for 8 years, defended him. She described Andy as a loving husband and devoted father, raising 2 sons and doing his best for his ungrateful daughter, Mindy. She saw him as a decent man who was unfairly labeled a tyrant to justify the murder. According to Joni, Andy spent much of his free time with his children, often taking them to the nearby river to fish and boat. This account was supported by all of Andy's neighbors. Joni described her husband as a hardworking man who devoted his life to his family. Andy's relatives were steadfast in their support of him, insisting that he was never cruel or manipulative. From the beginning, they described Mindy as an insecure and disobedient child whose negative traits worsened as she grew older. They portrayed her as a pathological liar and a rebellious individual who frequently tried to run away from home and even stole her father's car several times. Andy also suspects that she may be using illegal substances. Concerned about her behavior, he believes that strict rules need to be put in place to deal with the situation. Andy's relatives claim that this was not an act of self-defense, but rather a brutal and calculated murder by Mindy. They allege that she killed her father, a man who did everything in his power to keep his daughter out of trouble. Joni reported that Andy had blocked Mindy's phone. This was because Mindy had been calling her friends frequently, often planning to run away. He later discovered that Mindy had been skipping work, which led him to periodically check her car's mileage to ensure she did not lose her job at McDonald's. Andy also began searching her room after suspecting that she was smoking. Based on these actions, Andy's behavior appeared consistent with that of a controlling yet concerned parent. In the months leading up to the murder, Joni kept a diary documenting many of Mindy's disturbing behaviors. Mindy was described as a rule breaker. Joni's diary recorded every attempt Mindy made to run away, which had happened 3 times in the past 2 months. The diary also described how Mindy spent days lying in bed, drinking, and being dishonest. Because of this behavior, her loved ones found it impossible to trust her. According to Joni, Mindy's behavior was so out of control that Joni feared for her own safety. She overheard Mindy say things to her father that made her feel extremely insecure. This behavior continued for years. According to Joni, Andy only lost his temper once. On that occasion, he grabbed Mindy by the neck and pushed her against a wall. However, it was clear that he had no intention of harming her. Joni categorically denied that there was any abuse toward Mindy. She also stated that she never heard Andy insult his daughter, call her worthless, emotionally pressure her, or humiliate her, as Mindy had described. Joni was home when Andy died. She noticed that Mindy was acting strangely throughout the day but did not think much of it. Everything changed when Joni heard a loud bang. She immediately ran downstairs and saw Mindy pointing a gun at her. Joni quickly retrieved the gun, and no one was hurt. At first, she thought Mindy was just trying to get attention. However, when she went into the kitchen, Joni saw Andy lying on the floor near the entrance through the open door. She called out to him, but he did not respond. When she got closer, she realized he was dead. Mindy killed her father, whom she had hated for years, seemingly without any particular reason. Joni claimed that Andy had always tried to support and protect Mindy from the hardships of life. When the police arrived at the scene, they arrested Mindy and took her to the sheriff's office, where she tearfully confessed to the murder. At the police station, Joni stated that the act was intentional. She believed Mindy was manipulative and untrustworthy. The lawyers sought to damage Andy's reputation, as it was the only way to prove Mindy's innocence. From the beginning, Joni believed that Mindy was trying to deceive everyone to avoid responsibility for her terrible crime. However, the lawyers argued that Mindy had suffered years of emotional and physical abuse and only acted in self-defense when she felt her life and the life of her unborn child was in danger. Mindy, who had recently found out she was pregnant, was terrified, believing that her father would kill her if he found out. Mindy's strongest supporter remained her mother, Shirley. The prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including a poem found in Mindy's notebook, which had been discovered in her nightstand. The poem described the murder and was accompanied by a small drawing of a bleeding heart being stabbed with a knife. According to the prosecution, this suggested that Mindy had carefully planned the crime. The prosecution argued that when Mindy took the weapon from her father's room, she did not intend to kill herself. Instead, they claimed that she had taken the weapon and ambushed her father. Forensic scientists determined that Andy had been shot in the back with a shotgun, refuting the claim that he had attacked first. He could not have attacked with his back turned. A neighbor testified on behalf of the prosecution, stating that he was about 40 yards from the house when Andy opened the door. The neighbor said everything was quiet, and he did not hear Andy swearing or making threats, contrary to Mindy's claim. According to the neighbor, Andy simply walked into the house, and 10 seconds later, gunshots rang out. The defense attorneys argued that Mindy had been overwhelmed and scared for her life, and that she had acted in self-defense as she prepared to become a mother at a young age. The defense presented a key witness, Mindy's mother, Shirley, who described Andy as a cruel and abusive manipulator who had mistreated her and her older sons. Shirley explained that Andy would force the family to sit at the kitchen table for hours, humiliating and insulting them while clearly enjoying their discomfort. She noted that throughout their marriage, Mindy had been spared from these attacks only because she was so young at the time. However, after Shirley left, Andy's anger turned toward his daughter. Things changed when Mindy turned 15 and called Shirley for the first time, saying she could no longer tolerate Andy's bullying behavior. During this time, Mindy's mental state became extremely concerning. She was admitted to a clinic, where she was diagnosed with depression and had attempted suicide. She stayed there for 9 days, was given medication, and was discharged after her condition was deemed stable. However, her father's pressure and abuse continued. According to Mindy, this caused her to develop paranoia. She felt trapped, like a prisoner in her own home, unable to escape her overbearing father. To cope with her fear and pain, she began drinking and smoking marijuana. This behavior eventually attracted the attention of social services. However, it was Andy who contacted them, hoping to address what he described as Mindy's disturbing behavior. Andy was surprised when Laura Alvarado, a child abuse investigator, sided with Mindy after speaking with her. Laura believed that Mindy was not being defiant or out of control. Instead, it appeared that the teenager was feeling anxious and threatened at home. Mindy had pleaded for help, even expressing a desire to move into a foster home to escape her father. She also revealed that her mother had refused to take her in, unwilling to intervene because of the custody agreement. To Laura, this seemed less like the behavior of a rebellious teenager and more like a child who felt trapped and hopeless. Laura had several conversations with Mindy, but during their last meeting, something seemed different and more troubling. Mindy appeared closed off and unwilling to open up. Laura suspected that Andy had threatened her, but further investigation revealed no solid evidence. The most anticipated part of the hearing was Mindy's testimony in her own defense. This was a high-risk strategy, as it could either persuade the jury to sympathize with her or push them in the opposite direction. The outcome depended entirely on whether the jury believed her. Initially, Mindy's attorney decided to take the gamble, arguing that only Mindy could prove who was telling the truth and who was lying. However, the odds were clearly against her. Ultimately, the defense counsel advised taking a safer route. Mindy agreed to a plea bargain, which resulted in a reduced sentence of 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. Soon after, the situation changed. At age 20, Mindy had already served 4 years in prison and was now focused on seeking justice and regaining her freedom. During this time, the legal system had recognized mental distress as a valid defense, even in murder cases. This change provided a new perspective for Mindy's attorney. An appeal was filed and eventually accepted. However, the appeal came with significant risks. If the jury rejected Mindy's testimony, she could face life in prison, with a minimum of 33 years before she could apply for early release. Despite the high stakes, Mindy was determined to fight to clear her name. Both the prosecution and defense returned to present their cases, as they had during the first trial. Andy's wife, Joni, continued to grieve the loss of her husband and remained determined to prove that Mindy was responsible. At trial, Mindy recounted her traumatic experiences of enduring years of physical abuse at the hands of Andy. She described how he threatened her daily, constantly demeaning and humiliating her for seemingly trivial reasons. Desperate to avoid her father, she tried to limit contact, but living in the same house made that nearly impossible, Even brief encounters often escalated into conflicts and confrontations. The prosecutor's office repeated the arguments they had made during the first hearing. Mindy explained that she had chosen the bathroom to end her life, but she hesitated and was unable to go through with it. She discovered she was pregnant and felt a sense of responsibility for her unborn child. For an hour, she struggled with whether to live or die until she heard her father return home. At that moment, she realized she had lost the chance to return the gun to his room without being discovered. Mindy knew her father would be furious if he found out about her plan. Overcome with fear and emotional distress, she decided to protect herself and her child at all costs. Mindy also explained why she shot her father in the back. She said she had told him to check his answering machine, hoping to distract him while she quietly returned the gun to his room. But as she walked into the kitchen, she saw him begin to turn around and noticed the shotgun. Panicked and believing he was about to lunge at her, she pulled the trigger. The jury heard conflicting accounts. Andy's wife, Joni, and a nearby neighbor claimed there were no signs of a struggle or any screams for help, further suggesting that the killing was premeditated rather than an act of self-defense. At the hearing, an anonymous source revealed that a juror was biased. The juror had traveled from another state, motivated by Mindy's story. As a result, a new hearing was scheduled with a different jury. This time, the defense presented a new witness, Mindy's treating physician during her first hospitalization for depression and end-life thoughts. The physician confirmed that Mindy was severely depressed and exhibited clear signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. She would flinch at the sound of any noise or footsteps. The psychiatrist supported Mindy's testimony that she had been humiliated and tortured by her father. Under the circumstances, her actions in self-defense seemed understandable, especially as she feared for her life and the safety of her child. Both sides presented strong arguments. However, the prosecutor's office held back a critical move. They introduced their own psychiatrist, who strongly disagreed with the conclusions of Mindy's treating doctor. Mindy faced a significant setback when her brother disputed claims of domestic violence in the home, allegations often made by both her mother and Mindy. Ultimately, after 24 hours of deliberation, the jury found Mindy Bereniite guilty of murdering her father. She was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Mindy's lawyers were shocked by the outcome, as they had not anticipated such a harsh sentence. The fate of Mindy's child remains unknown. In an earlier interview, Mindy admitted she knew her actions were wrong but insisted that desperation and fear drove her to kill her father, whom she described as a tyrant. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of John Sweeney. John Sweeney was born on October 13, 1956. He grew up with an older brother and an older sister. People familiar with John's family described his father as a cruel and controlling man. From an early age, John was subjected to his father's strictness and was often the target of physical punishment. Psychologists later identified these harsh experiences as a major factor contributing to John's challenges as an adult. Despite their difficult living environment, John's family was close-knit and working class. His father instilled values of assertiveness and resilience in his sons. However, his methods were harsh, and he may have passed on his authoritarian attitude toward women to John, teaching him that women should always be submissive. Despite these hardships, John developed a strong passion for painting from an early age. At 15, he dreamed of attending art school, but his family did not support his aspirations. Instead, he studied carpentry and specialized in woodworking. This career path left John with a lingering sense of frustration, as he was unable to pursue his true ambitions and was forced to follow a different path in life. John had problems with the police from an early age. As a teenager, he displayed extremely violent tendencies, which led to a number of disturbing incidents. He frequently exhibited aggressive and violent behavior, often targeting his friends. One reported incident involved John getting into a dangerous fight while in high school at a nearby store where he was buying chips. Despite still being a minor, he picked up an axe and swung it aggressively. Witnesses said that, fortunately, no one was injured in the incident. The reckless teenager faced no serious consequences and was only given a warning by the police. By 1974, John had decided to marry. His wife, Ann Bramley, was his neighbor. Together, John and Ann had 2 children, a son and a daughter. Despite Ann's hopes that marriage and family life would calm him down, John remained ruthless, and nothing seemed to change his erratic nature. John's violent outbursts were especially severe when he was drunk, and revealed that he often harmed her pets to intimidate her and escalated conflicts by throwing bricks through windows, causing significant property damage. He repeatedly accused her of infidelity, even though she was faithful and gave him no reason to suspect her. Ironically, John himself had no qualms about pursuing romantic relationships with other women. According to family acquaintances, John treated his girlfriends as if they were his property. His first wife, Ann, experienced this firsthand. She described John Sweeney as sweet and charming until his mood changed. When this happened, he would focus on small issues, becoming aggressive and cruel. In these moments, he would easily explode and seem to invent reasons to justify his anger when none existed. After enduring this behavior for 5 years, Ann decided to file for divorce in 1979. However, like many manipulators, John tried everything to convince her to reconcile. Surprisingly, his efforts worked, and the couple remarried in 1981. During this time, John was able to control his behavior, leading Ann to believe that he had truly changed. Unfortunately, this did not last. Soon after they remarried, John's aggressive and uncontrollable behavior returned, and domestic violence once again became a regular occurrence. Before their relationship ended, they experienced another violent incident. One evening, John got drunk and attacked Ann. This event led her to make a firm decision to leave him and not attempt to mend the relationship. However, true to the behavior of a manipulator, John did not let go easily. Viewing his wife as his possession, John began stalking her. After Ann moved into a new house, an incident occurred while she was visiting a neighbor in the apartment next door. Through the wall, Ann heard suspicious noises coming from her apartment. She suspected it could either be John with malicious intentions or a burglar breaking in. Both possibilities seemed dangerous. Not wanting to take any chances, Ann called the police. When they arrived, the officers escorted her back to her apartment and searched the premises for any threats. Suddenly, John emerged from the closet, holding clothes in one hand and an axe and a knife in the other. He appeared startled to see the police and claimed he had planned to surprise his ex-wife. However, Ann believed he had brought the weapons with the intent to harm her, possibly even to kill her, as she had finally escaped his control. Unsurprisingly, the police did not believe John's story about the surprise and arrested him. However, he was later released without charges because he had not harmed anyone and was technically in his own apartment. The police only secured a verbal promise from him to stay away from Ann. After the divorce was finalized, Ann left with her children, moved away, and went into hiding to escape her dangerous ex-husband. Eventually, John gave up pursuing her. He decided it was time to change his life, leaving the city and embarking on a tour around Europe in hopes of forgetting his troubled past. He began searching for work abroad, believing he could find better opportunities and earn more money. Finding temporary jobs abroad was not difficult for John, but he never stayed in one place for long. He traveled to Germany and France before eventually settling in the Netherlands. Further investigations did not uncover any evidence of assaults on women during these trips. While abroad, John returned to his old habits, searching for a woman he could marry. However, his efforts were unsuccessful, and he was eventually forced to return to his homeland. Interestingly, upon his return, John rediscovered his passion for painting. Experts later analyzed his artwork and attributed its themes to his criminal nature. His paintings were gruesome, often violent and bloody, depicting brutal scenes. However, at the time, they were dismissed as mere works of art. Later, John made a living as a carpenter, taking on repair and construction jobs. He eventually settled in London, where he met Melissa Halstead, a model and photographer. She had hired him to do repairs on a film set. Melissa was an incredibly beautiful woman, and John seemed to take an immediate interest in her. Originally from Ohio, USA, Melissa had moved to another country in Europe, where she felt lonely and had few social connections. She was unaware of John's violent past. John quickly regained his charm, and after visiting her on set a few times, he suggested they meet. This marked the beginning of their romantic relationship. At first, Melissa described their relationship as warm and loving, reflecting John's manipulative behavior. Over time, they began living together. Less than a year later, John attacked her for the first time. Before this, he had repeatedly broken her self-esteem and cheated on her, leaving her feeling completely hopeless. Her career began to suffer, and her family back in Ohio recognized the toxicity of the relationship. Both her mother and sister urged Melissa to leave John as soon as possible. About a year after they met, Melissa's sister visited her in England. While staying at Melissa and John's apartment, she discovered banned substance and some disturbing artwork that John had created. She was shocked by what she saw. Before leaving, Melissa's sister begged her to end the relationship immediately. Despite this, Melissa chose to stay with John. In 1987, John committed his first violent attack on Melissa, which led to legal trouble. He was cautioned twice for his violent behavior. On one occasion, John threw a chair at Melissa, injuring both her legs. On another occasion, he punched her in the face. However, both times he only received verbal warnings and small fines. At the time, British authorities had a lenient attitude towards domestic violence. In the summer of 1988, John decided to move to Austria, and Melissa went with him. Initially, the move seemed to benefit their relationship. They reconnected and experienced a period without violence. During this time, things went well. They both made good money, and Melissa's modeling career began to take off again. She traveled frequently for work, and they could now afford to rent an apartment in central Vienna. However, their relationship soon fell apart. One evening, John's violent nature resurfaced, and he attacked Melissa with a hammer. She was taken to the hospital with a fractured skull. It seems that John harbored resentment towards her and became increasingly obsessed with his art. Psychologists later analyzed his artwork and concluded that it reflected his inner turmoil and violent worldview. Unfortunately, at the time these drawings appeared, no one paid much attention to John or recognized the warning signs. The haunting images clearly showed his desire to kill. While John was in prison, Melissa was recovering from the attack. Despite everything, she no longer resented John and even began to miss him. In February 1989, she appealed to the Austrian legal system, asking the court to pardon John. Under Austrian law, she had the right to do so. Her appeal was successful. Melissa withdrew her statement about the attack, and John was released after serving only 6 months. However, the police ordered John to leave Austria. Despite this, Melissa chose to follow him. They settled in Amsterdam together. In Amsterdam, John and Melissa rented an apartment in the city center, worked, and used a rental car. Their home was located near the train station. In November 1989, Melissa called her family. Since no one was home, she left a voicemail wishing her loved ones well, expressing her love, and saying that she hoped to see them again soon. After the call, she went on a business trip. In the following months, her family tried to contact her, but they were unable to reach her. At that time, cell phones were not available, making communication even more difficult. John also ignored all calls from Melissa's family. After a while, Melissa, exhausted by the constant conflicts and abuse from John, decided to end their relationship. She confided in her colleagues at work, telling them that if anything happened to her, it would be because of John. Soon after, she disappeared and was never seen alive again. On May 3, 1990, a passerby in Rotterdam noticed a suspicious bag floating in a canal. Upon inspection, the bag was found to contain body parts, although the head and hands were missing. The witness immediately alerted the police. The brutal nature of the crime became evident when the body was examined. What shocked the police most was that the victim's spine had been broken in half, and evidence suggested she had been subjected to prolonged torture designed to inflict extreme pain. After the murder, the perpetrator placed the body in a large black bag, which was then dumped in a canal. At the same time, Melissa's family grew increasingly worried, as they had not heard from her for months. A missing person report had been filed in Amsterdam, but since the Rotterdam police did not have access to it, they were unable to identify the victim. With no leads, the investigation was eventually closed. The unidentified remains were buried in a public cemetery in Rotterdam in an unmarked grave, and the police remained unaware of the victim's identity. John, the killer, escaped justice. By 1991, John had returned to London alone. He never told anyone about what had happened to Melissa. Her family suspected that John was involved in her disappearance, but there was no evidence to prove it. As a result, John continued his life without facing any consequences. At a local pub, John met Delia Balmer, a 40-year-old nurse. Their meeting was initially accidental, but John quickly used his charm to make her fall in love with him. Delia, feeling lonely, invited him to move into her house. John seized the opportunity, helping her with the housework and earning her trust. During this time, he worked as a carpenter, earning a good income by creating furniture and home furnishings. However, over time, John's true nature began to reveal itself. After nearly 2 years together, in December 1993, Delia realized the extent of John's temper and cruelty. She finally asked him to leave. Surprisingly, he did not argue and agreed to move out. However, he did not truly leave her life. John continued to frequent the same shops and bars as Delia, making sure they crossed paths often. Wherever she went, John seemed to appear, controlling and pursuing her relentlessly. He even attempted to re-enter her apartment. In May 1994, Delia went on a short trip around Europe with a friend. When she returned, John was furious that he had temporarily lost control of her. He tracked her down, tied her to the bed, and threatened her with a weapon, intensifying her fear. To further intimidate her, John told her a disturbing story about his previous girlfriend, Melissa. He confessed to killing Melissa, sitting with her body in his apartment for 3 days, and then disposing of her remains by dumping them in a canal in another city. Delia realized she was now trapped with a crazed killer. John demanded her complete obedience, warning her that if she did not comply, she would suffer the same fate as Melissa. Delia endured a week of abuse. During this time, she was repeatedly beaten, assaulted, and threatened with a weapon before finally being released in the summer of 1994. In July, Delia sought refuge at a shelter and reported the abuse to the police. She even showed them John Sweeney's disturbing drawings. However, the police dismissed her concerns, calling them a joke and accusing her of exaggeration. In early November, John left the apartment, and Delia took the opportunity to change the locks. When he returned on November 11th and discovered what she had done, he became furious. Despite locking the door, he managed to break in and attack Delia. The next day, Delia fled to the police station again. The officers escorted her back home, but John had disappeared. However, another attack occurred the following day. This time, Delia's neighbors and friends called the police. The officers arrived just in time, as John was inside the apartment with Delia. She ran out to meet the police, crying and terrified. During a search of the apartment, the police discovered a bag in the bathroom that John had brought with him. Inside the bag were rubber gloves, a mask, some rope, and surgical instruments, items that could be used by a murderer. Despite this alarming discovery, the police dismissed its significance. John was arrested and held for a week before being released on the condition that he returned to his parents' home, 300 kilometers away from Delia. This distance was considered safe. But on December 22nd, John violated the terms of his bail by going to Delia's house in the evening. That night, Delia, feeling nervous, used a brick to block the basement door before going downstairs to put her bike away. She kept glancing around cautiously, afraid that John might be nearby. When she turned around, she saw John's familiar face staring at her. Suddenly, he pulled out an axe and swung it at her. She tried to defend herself with a knife, trying to cut his palm. Enraged, John grabbed the knife and attacked her. Delia screamed in pain and desperately used her bike as a shield against his repeated attacks. The commotion attracted the attention of neighbors. A man rushed to help, wielding a baseball bat and confronting John to protect Delia. John struck the neighbor several times before fleeing the scene. Delia was then taken to the hospital in critical condition, where she underwent several emergency operations that ultimately saved her life. The police began pursuing John Sweeney, who had fled. Despite their efforts, he evaded capture and escaped the UK. He remained in hiding for the next 6 years until he returned to the UK in 2000. To avoid detection, he used a false identity. John was highly skilled at altering his appearance, which made it easy for him to avoid detection. He quickly found work on construction sites and often used different fake names to remain unnoticed. After returning to his hometown, he met Paula Fields. Like John's other victims, Paula was lonely and vulnerable. Since they both came from the same area, John was able to establish a relationship with her quickly. Paula had spent most of her life on the streets. It was surprising that John managed to deceive her, as people like Paula, hardened by street life, were often very adept at reading others and recognizing manipulators or abusers. However, John Sweeney was such a skilled manipulator that he succeeded in fooling even someone like her. At first, their relationship seemed calm and romantic, but over time, John began to show signs of dissatisfaction. His frustration escalated into aggression and hostility. In December, John Sweeney committed a brutal crime. He killed Paula, and after handling the body, he placed the parts in separate bags. He disposed of the bags in the London Canal. On February 19, 2001, boys fishing in the canal discovered one of the bags containing Paula's body parts. They immediately contacted the police, who later recovered 5 more bags containing other parts of her remains. Advances in DNA technology helped identify the victim as Paula Fields and revealed a suspicious boyfriend. At the time, John was using an alias. However, further investigation by the police uncovered that her boyfriend's real name was John Sweeney. He was also linked to the murder of Melissa Halstead and was wanted for an attack on Delia Balmer. John became one of Britain's most wanted men. The police eventually tracked John down at a construction site in central London, where he was working. A specialist armed team was deployed to arrest him, as he was known to carry weapons. When apprehended, John did not resist, likely overwhelmed by the presence of heavily armed officers. A subsequent search of his flat uncovered over 300 gruesome works of art and poetry. Some of these artworks contained references to Paula and other victims. John Sweeney was later convicted of the attempted murder of Delia Balmer. On March 5, 2002, he was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after only 9 years. With good behavior, he could have been released even earlier. Delia was deeply unhappy with this outcome. As the police continued to investigate Paula Fields' death, they faced numerous challenges. It took another 6 years. In 2008, they were finally able to match DNA from an unidentified victim found in a Rotterdam canal to Melissa Halstead. This discovery linked John Sweeney to another murder. Delia's testimony, which included his confession, along with the presence of his DNA on Melissa's remains, played a key role in connecting him to this brutal crime. Melissa's murder had taken place more than 20 years earlier. Her family finally learned the truth and sought justice. Despite the evidentiary challenges, the police decided to use John's artwork as admissible evidence. Several of his drawings referenced Melissa's death long before her body was identified. One drawing even depicted a headstone bearing her name, details that only the killer could have known. Nearly 21 years after Melissa's death and 6 years after Paula's murder, the trial for these cases was held on April 4, 2011. John Sweeney was convicted of murder and sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. This ensures that John will spend the rest of his life in prison. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Sweppel family. Stephen Sweppel graduated from a local university in the 80s with a degree in business and planned to build his finances during his studies. He worked various jobs, including as a bartender and lifeguard, but he always remained modest. When Stephen met Cheryl, they got to know each other, and the lovers became inseparable. Thus began a relationship in which they complemented each other excellently. At university, she was very smart and loved working with children. Therefore, she became a social studies teacher, actively participating in everything from book and religious gatherings to various events with her beloved. Some time later, they got married. It seemed like a perfect union, destined to last forever. After several unsuccessful attempts to have children, Cheryl decided not to take any risks. As a result, they decided to adopt. Cheryl has adopted 4 children into her family, which was a thrilling experience for her, as she had always wanted to be a mother for those who needed it during their childhood. In the large house where they lived, Ethan, the eldest of all the adopted children, was born in 1998. They liked him very much because he was greatly interested in everything. He was showing energy that they appreciated for the sake of the family. Their 4th child, Eleanor, was born in 2005. She was the youngest of them all. Events brought a stable income, therefore, their family was always filled with warmth and harmony. This is not a classic story of career success. Cheryl left her school job after more than a decade, allowing her to spend more time with her children. She regularly started visiting her children's parents and grandparents, who lived a few kilometers away. They became local celebrities. A wealthy family adopting 4 children took on real parental roles. They wanted to give their growing generation as much as possible. In February 2008, everything turned upside down. The bank found itself in danger due to an incident involving the theft of over $500,000. Investigative organizations that were involved dismissed Stephen. But that was not the end. The investigation lasted longer than necessary to maintain its progress since there was no overwhelming evidence of his involvement. Ultimately, it was revealed that his position was affected by the economic crisis in 2007, related to problems in the mortgage market and over-indebtedness. Stephen sought to create a financial cushion that was plausible, as he was hard at work during that period. In a constant state of stress, a person is prone to making mistakes. New information reveals that throughout this time, they were indeed becoming the center of public attention, as the waste of such an amount appeared to be a source of sensational news regarding involvement in financial crime. Stephen lived under significant, constant pressure, especially from Cheryl, which irritated him. totaling $559.040 over 7 years, was also reported. Stephen has pleaded not guilty, but has indicated to investigators that he did indeed transfer the money into a personal account. Like Cheryl, others did not understand that real problems had begun, which posed a significant issue for the family. More information on the 2008 financial crimes indicated that bail was set to remain free, scheduled for April 21st of the same year. In the event of a guilty plea for the serious crime, the minimum sentence would range from 3 to 5 years, after which a possibility might arise. A significant blow followed, not only to Stephen's reputation but also to their relationships in America. Sweppel family began to collapse, and they often struggled with the consequences. A true storm from the outside awaited them. However, they remained sociable and polite, despite the stress and mental disturbances that could affect future events. On Sunday morning, the Sweppel family attended Easter Mass at St. Mary's Catholic Church. Stephen and Cheryl's parents were also present at the Mass and later said they did not notice anything unusual about anyone's behavior. That evening, a family friend stopped by the Sweppels' home to check on Stephen. The friend saw one of the children, but saw nothing unusual. In fact, a terrible tragedy occurred. On March 23, 2008 morning at 6:31 a.m., Sweppel called 911 from his cell phone, asking for police to come to his home immediately and hanging up without giving his name. When police arrived at his home, they found Sweppel's wife, Cheryl, and their 4 adopted children, Ethan, 10, Seth, 9, Mira, 5, and Eleanor, 3, dead from multiple blunt force injuries to the upper body and head. Police recovered the alleged murder weapons, 2 baseball bats, at the scene. According to forensic experts, at the time of her death, Cheryl was around 30 years old and likely died around at 11:30 p.m. At the same time as Sweppel left a series of voice messages apologizing to former colleagues and relatives. Stephen Sweppel left a note for his father and brother at their law firm. In the note, he said his family was in heaven. According to Stephen, they were doomed to humiliation, and inevitably, he would end up in prison. According to the letter Stephen wrote, he gathered his 4 children into the family van parked in the garage and attempted to kill them then himself with carbon monoxide poisoning. When that didn't work, Stephen took the children back into the house and beat them to death. The 3 oldest children were found in their bedrooms. Eleanor, the youngest, was found downstairs in the playroom. Investigators soon uncovered that Stephen had murdered their entire family, revealing that reliable information was scarce. Cheryl was probably killed during the initial attempt to cover up the crime using carbon monoxide poisoning. Nevertheless, he lacked the courage to take his own life and refused to surrender. In the face of his wife's and children's horrific death, he can't separate death from life. Approximately at 6:36 a.m., unsuccessful attempts became more evident when Sweppel died in a tragic crash on Interstate 80 outside Iowa City. Witnesses said the driver was speeding and appeared to intentionally hit a concrete pillar. There were virtually no signs of slowing down at 100 kilometers per hour. Upon impact, the car overturned. They discovered a badly charred body, from which identification was initially impossible. The community reported that the threat was gone, not ignoring the risk that he may have orchestrated his death to evade justice. The charred remains were identified using dental records, to everyone's relief amidst the horrifying events now unfolding. It was hard to comprehend that they had been a respectable family, even if a bit of alcohol mixed with substances had been a fabrication that no one could believe or confirm. His loved ones often felt overwhelming sorrow. The event struck the entire community hard, as their lives had been brutally cut short. Stephen was not just a son-in-law to them, but a beloved son, and they sincerely mourned his death. On March 24th, their youngest child was to turn 3 years old. The term annihilator describes a phenomenon where a person kills their entire family. In this case, committing took his own life was akin to this situation. In 68% of cases involving family annihilators, they often kill to spare their loved ones from future suffering. Decent family men may seem like role models for family life, even if they begin to exhibit violent tendencies. The fact that Cheryl decided to return to work might have weighed heavily on him. Meanwhile, the mystery of the $500,000 stolen from the bank remains unsolved. Some believe everything is connected to the house that remained after settling the mortgage before going to court.